If you were in my house,
crazy.
no,
You
hold
don't
on,
see
wait.
that that's crazy?
If you come to my
I'm
house,
sorry. This okay? Is Cenk okay? Oh my God! No, I'm sorry. This feels like he's twisting himself in knots not to agree with Destiny. Is his take legitimately that if somebody lunges for your gun while you're in somebody's home, like you can go into somebody's house, lunge for their gun after chasing them around the house, and not expect to get shot? Debate.
And I was like, okay, sure, let's do it.
Debate.
gotcha. All right. Well, I guess I'll start. Are you familiar at all with anything that I do, or have you heard about any of my internet presence or anything? Or
Yes, but I learned the hard way never to trust anything on the internet.
okay, good starting place. Okay,
So
basically
I don't.
yeah.
So Steve,
Okay, I have a weird feeling. Okay, who wants to bet? Okay, before we start this, boys, who's betting on who? Okay, 1 if you're betting on Cenk, 2 if you're betting on Destiny. Okay, I'm not gonna bias the betting pool. I better see site chat active. I better see even gutter chat. 1 if you got Destiny, 2 if you got Cenk. Oh my God, everybody but Bookworm and site chat seems to have Destiny winning. I think I see a few people in gutter chat who are more pro Cenk, more pro Team Young Turk. Cynthia, thank you so much for the primer. Being sub for 2 months. I really appreciate that. Thank you. It seems like the vast majority of you guys are Team Destiny. Anyway, which one is pro Cenk? No, number 1 if you think Cenk's gonna win. Number 2 if you think Destiny is gonna win. Anyway, you guys already put the numbers out there. You can do it again if you want quick. Now, I smell the blood from a mile away. I can spell it. I can smell it. I think Destiny's got this one. And you want to know why I know this? Because I feel it in my bones, and my bones never lie. Let's watch. Now, this is live, by the way, so I couldn't have pre-watched it, okay? Let's see how he does.
Steven, I'll just say, look, I know that some people say, oh, don't platform X, don't platform Y, don't go on here, don't go on there. Did you know what he said back when he was 17 or 37? And yeah, no, I don't care about any of that. Okay, so we're going to have this discussion. And so if you've got something particularly terrible thing to say, or I do, we'll correct each other. Okay, so God bless. And I hear what do I hear about you? I hear you're an establishment hack.
Yes, proudly so.
Establishment
hack.
Damn.
Okay, well, I was just curious so that I know how to catch us all up. So the long and short of it is basically, I got into doing online politics around 2016 with the era of Trump, along with apparently the entire United States got into politics more in that time period than ever before. When I first came on the scene, my whole political career was being as combative as possible, combative, condescending, patronizing.
Wait, when we say that like American public was more involved in politics when Trump was in office than ever before, we mean like modern history of the United States. Well, actually, no. If you go through a lot of history of the United States, a lot of the American public couldn't even vote. But is this true of like the 70s of the 80s too? That we had a higher voter turnout in this now, I mean, in 2016 than we had in the 70s, 80s, in 2020. I think 2020, like, we had record high turnout when it comes to the total number, but I don't know if that was the case as a percentage.
And through that kind of like blood sports battling as like a left-leaning commentator, I kind of cut my teeth doing that for a while, became kind of popular online doing online politics. And now I've kind of shifted away towards like, how can I be more empathetic, understanding, and like really hone in on why do we disagree with people politically, and then what can I do to kind of push my message while still understanding, I guess, the concerns of the other side. Broadly speaking, that's what I do. But I try to actually do that, not like in a Dave Rubin centrist kind of way where you pretend to listen to both sides, but really you're just a conservative in disguise in every single sense of the word. Okay.
No, Stephen, I'll give you credit from the get-go that from the few things that I've seen, no, you appear to be an actual independent thinker. So you're not like the fake left for sure. And your opinions are so all over the place that you can't help but think
He's a
that
real independent thinker.
So,
I'll take that as a compliment. I'm not entirely sure, but it is a compliment to everybody, but sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And by the way that I look at these, we call them debates, but I really, in my mind, I view them as discussions because there's plenty of things that I'm sure we'll agree on, right?
Sure.
And things that we'll disagree on, and that'll be fun too. And like I remember going to the debate club and the political union in undergrad, and I didn't want the debate club because I'm like, oh, we're debating cats or dogs. Well, you're just trying to prove who's more clever, right? Let's get the policy. Let's figure out where we both stand, and then let the audience decide.
Yeah, I agree. So one of the things that I kind of bring up when I'm making the rounds on, I got into a little fight with Alex Jones on a panel, I think a couple months ago. I've done Tim Pool's show a couple times. One of the questions that I'm starting to hone in on a lot when I talk to people is, after you've said your spiel, you've said your piece, you've gone on your diatribe, your rant, you've explained your issues, what do you want people at home to do? One of the things I'm kind of looking at for a lot of political discourse is, it feels like that the way that a lot of it is set up is, from the very beginning to the very end, there's this air of hopelessness. On the conservative side, depending on how conservative you go, it's Jewish people controlling the Great Replacement, and immigration is getting rid of us, and everybody's controlling the state-run media, the swamp, et cetera, which basically leaves their constituents with like, what do we have to do? January 6th, Buffalo.
I hope my bones weren't wrong.
Shooter.
Then again, it might be a nice convo. Who knows?
It's extremist rhetoric. All we can do is fight with weapons. That's the only thing we can do. And on the left, I kind of notice sometimes that depending on what we're talking about, and then I get this vibe kind of from the Young Turks, that depending on what we're talking about, the rhetoric feels similar-ish. Giving you credit, I mean, you said explicitly multiple times, like, don't bring weapons to riots, don't bring weapons to protests, it's not a good idea. But sometimes when it feels like we get so down on everybody, even establishment Democrats, that it's like, geez, it feels like there's no hope. Like if Biden didn't pass something that the most progressive person in Congress wants, then it's a watered down bipartisan garbage bill that he gets no credit for. And then kind of, I guess the ground for this discussion, I guess, can be the recent debt ceiling negotiation. But I mean, we can talk about the infrastructure bill, the American Rescue Plan, whatever other thing. I guess what is your general feeling of that? Like, is there any part of you that's like, you know what? He might not be the most progressive president ever. I think he is, but he might not be the most progressive president ever. But at least Biden did this or this in terms of major legislation. Do you have that feeling, or?
So yes and no. But it's a great question to start on. So first off, look, if you've come looking for hope, you've come to the right place.
Okay.
So I'm the king of hope.
The king.
And I even wrote a poem called Hope. Okay. So and our audience knows I am intensely optimistic. And so when I get a sense of hopelessness, what I do is I try to fix it. And we do active things in the world, like we created Justice Democrats. We launched it on the Young Turks. We launched the improbable campaign of AOC, and nobody thought that was possible, and we did it. And then when we started Justice Democrats, everybody thought you'd be lucky to get one. Now we have 11 in Congress, right? So I 100% believe in hope. Ro Khanna was on the show today on the Young Turks talking about what we can do to fight forward. Okay. Now, in terms of the Biden, no, look, if you say, hey, is there things that he's done well? Oh, absolutely. So here are a laundry list of things I'll give him credit for. Getting out of Afghanistan. And I did not agree with corporate media. Oh, it was a mess. It was terrible. They always say that when we're ending a war.
But it also was a mess. I mean, you cannot tell me that there were Afghans falling from a plane, like from the sky, and say, oh, that wasn't a mess. That we intended for those Afghans to fall to their death. Yeah, that was part of it. Oh, those 13 service members, that just, it happens. It is what it is. People flooding the tarmac, all the people we left behind. The government collapsed much more quickly than we expected. Obviously it was going to be a mess to some degree, but we can't pretend that it was completely organized withdrawal. We're just denying reality.
They never say it when we're starting a war, right? So no, I'm thrilled that Biden got us out of Afghanistan. Did Trump start that process? He did. So what? Biden finished it, right? And he did it right away. The infrastructure bill is good in the long run. I have a giant asterisk on it, but I'll take it. Even the semiconductor bill, it's a giant giveaway to the semiconductor industry, but we do need a national semiconductor industry. So it's a complicated one. It's nuanced, right? The COVID relief bill had some of the most.
I think the other option would be like having a nationalized semiconductor industry, which I don't know if we were ever going to get that through, even with the Democratic caucus. And I don't even think Biden wants that. I don't know what the other option would be. I'd be interested to hear it.
One of the provisions that help the average American the most out of any bill I've covered in like 20 years, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of that already sunset and was obliterated later on. So I can go on and on, right? But in terms of, is Biden a progressive? Absolutely not. Has he done enough? Absolutely not, okay? And so it's not me being nihilistic to say that. credit where credit is due, and then discredit where discredit is due. So, for example, and I can give you many, but let's start here. So, Stephen, he said like $15 minimum wage was like bare minimum. Oh, of course we were going to get that. I remember when he got into office, and I told legislators, I said to people on air, our audience, etc., they're not going to do it, and everybody was incredulous. No, he promised that 8 weeks to Sunday. He's definitely going to do it. And what did he do? He had his 2 Delaware senators that are his top allies in the Senate vote against it. He came out and spoke during the Super Bowl interview against it. He was never going to do it. He was lying all along. He's been a conservative on economic issues for 50 straight years.
As far as I am aware, Joe Biden was speaking in favor of a $15 minimum wage, but there were so many different hurdles in the legislative branch that it wasn't going to happen. That's what I have been led to believe from what I remember the votes were. I think like the closest they could ever get was like 48-52 for a $15 minimum wage. I don't remember the time where Joe Biden came out and spoke against the $15 minimum wage. I don't remember that. I would be interested in seeing Destiny ask for a source on that.
And I can go down a laundry list of things he was never going to do. Paid family leave, public option. He promised public option 1,000 times. Never once proposed it. Never once even talked about it.
Sure.
Because he was lying.
Okay, so this is, okay, I want to hone in on this. So firstly, I love everything you said in the beginning, okay? And I might repeat this line a lot. I feel like sometimes when I get people in front of me and we chat, their takes become very, very, very reasonable. But in going over like the videos for this conversation, the things I'm hearing, like in regards to the debt ceiling, I was like, there are no wins for Democrat, none, zero. Biden hates the middle class. Well, sure. The Democrats and the Republicans are on the same goddamn team. Democrats just give McCarthy gift after gift after gift after gift. Do you really think that like a Republican administration would more or less do the same thing as like a Democratic administration or a Democrat administration?
So with an asterisk, yes. So like
what's the asterisk?
For example, they did the IRS funding.
I mean, you can just look at like how the Iran deal, how like Trump and Obama like approached the Iran deal differently. You can just look at how Trump, I mean, like Obamacare, a ton of problems with Obamacare. Obamacare is not the end state of American healthcare. It cannot be the end state of American healthcare. But if you compare what Obama did to Trump, Trump did nothing. He literally said, I will propose my healthcare plan after I become president. What a ridiculous statement on its face. The idea that you could literally just avoid what is the number one political issue, number 1, 2, or 3 for like in the last 3 or 4 elections, a political issue in the United States. It is world renowned how shitty and garbage your healthcare is. And his response to being asked about a healthcare plan is, I don't know, I'll tell you later. And then he didn't tell you later, but he still tried to repeal Obamacare, only being stopped by John McCain before he passed away while he was still in the Senate. I mean, I have problems with Joe Biden. I think one of my biggest problems with Joe Biden is he's not aggressive enough. And for example, like marijuana legalization, this is something that he could go out and openly endorse. And I do believe when it comes to the public option stuff, which I do think, even though it is still, again, not my end state in American healthcare, it is still a massive step forward. I have seen very little to basically zero movement of that on that during this administration. Do I think that during 2020 or 2022 that they could have gotten public option through? No, I don't. But I do believe talking about these issues and building up to these issues are important while you don't have that legislative dominance, so you can build up that legislative dominance. When we talk about Joe Biden, we need to be like, here's the affirmative. We can't just be 2024, Trump, okay? I mean, we did that with Hillary, didn't work. We did that semi with Biden. It was more successful because we just experienced Trump. But there needs to be something affirmative. And a public option for healthcare is something affirmative that the majority of Americans can get behind, especially since the affirmative option that he's been pushing pushes no restrictions on private healthcare options, meaning that we would not be restricting Americans for private healthcare options. So I do agree with Cenk on the idea that a lot of these issues he should be pushing more, but also I don't think that many of the issues they're talking about could have actually become a legislative accomplishment during 2022 or 2023, because the votes are just not there.
IRS $80 billion over 10 years. That was the one. And by the way, Stevie, you can go back and watch our clips on Afghanistan, on the infrastructure bill, on all of these. I haven't changed my position 1%. So
Sure.
what I say on air at the Young Turks is what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, the reason you might notice me being more vitriolic is because those are the videos that get more attention, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I also mean those 200%. So yes, the IRS bill was good, and that was a bill that the Republicans definitely would not have done. And I said, okay, look, give the Democratic Party credit there. There's a slight difference, even on economic issues. Okay, Now, having said that, the rest of it has been a disaster. So the debt ceiling, there was one tiny thing we got, and God bless. Okay, we got the exemption for homeless and veterans on SNAP. Okay. But the other 8 things were all for Republicans. We got nothing back. We didn't need to do it at all. And I think, and this is the part that's probably going to really bother you, I think that Biden wanted to do all those things. So when Obama was president, they invent this thing about, we're going to now negotiate the debt ceiling. Okay, it's a Republican ploy, but Obama and Biden love going along with those ploys. They love it. They could easily just go 14th Amendment. I'm done with it. Oh, by the way, if you'd like to wreck the world economy, that is going to be 100% on you. Okay. Well, instead, when he gets into a negotiation, it becomes 50% on him. And then in that negotiation, he gets almost nothing and gets slaughtered on everything else.
Okay. So let's hone in on this a little bit. Okay. So Biden has largely gotten to pass a lot of major legislation, right? We had the infrastructure bill, we had the American Rescue Plan, like huge ticket things. And our budget has been insanely huge. On our discretionary spending, we're talking like $1.5 trillion over and over and over again. With the debt ceiling approaching and with the Republicans taking the House, I'm pretty sure every single political analyst thought the Democrats were going to have to give a lot when it came time to negotiate on the debt ceiling stuff. Now, Biden said he originally wasn't going to negotiate, but regardless of how we feel, like it's a Democratic president. If the United States defaulted on the debt, it would be catastrophic. Failures to negotiate the debt ceiling are always going to hurt the sitting president more than the Republican Party. We're not going to be able to blame House Republicans when Democrats have this.
I remember for a short period of time, I did see polls that seemed to slightly indicate that Americans believe that Republicans are more at fault for the debt ceiling negotiations. But since then, I've seen more polling that's come forward that seems to either be like it's within the margin of error, so it's like 50-50, they kind of like blame them equally, or even in some of them now, Biden's overtaken the Republicans as the favorite for who's at fault for the failure to raise the debt ceiling.
Senate and the presidency. I feel like when we look at everything that was given, and I guess this is my problem when I listen to you guys talk about this, is I hear this like Republicans got everything they want. We just gave and gave and gave and gave. The difference between the House bill that McCarthy passed versus what was finally signed in the Senate, I felt like it was some of the, and I see everybody else say this. Krugman was saying this. The guys at Pod Save America was saying this. Even Ben Shapiro was admitting this, that the political maneuvering was pretty good. That like some of the stuff that was given up wasn't really a give up at all. So for instance, a lot of people complain about work requirements on SNAP. So work requirements were increased from 49 years of age to 54 years of age. But because of the wide exemption that was given for veterans and homeless people, I think the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, their guesstimate was that the outlays from that program are actually going to increase. We're going to spend more money on that program than we were before. Because if you look at the unemployment in that age bracket, it's like 2.5%. Like most people are working in this age bracket. It's not like they're having trouble finding jobs or anything. And there's a lot of exemptions made for like people in for people with children, people from orphanages, people with mental illness. There's a lot of exemptions made for that. That's like one example. And they're like example after example after example of like the gives that we made were just not a big deal. And a lot of the important stuff like Social Security, Medicaid, repeals of the student loan debt, none of this got through on the Republican side. So when I see that like the things that we did give were things that were either coming anyway. So for instance, like the student aid, the interest on the student loan starting to, I guess, tick back again and repayment starting at the end of summer. This was already going to happen, and we gave that, but we didn't really lose anything. You look at like the SNAP stuff. You look at the IRS. We fought for $80 billion in increased funding. We gave $20 billion back for now. I feel like that was a major win for Biden in that we moved past the debt ceiling thing for 2 years. The 2-year thing bothered you guys. The House bill was worlds apart. They wanted a 10-year cap on spending, and we got that down to 2. And then the budgets that we got was like $700 billion versus the $550 they were asking for in the House for 2024 fiscal year 2025. that all of this seems like pretty decent stuff. Again, I understand that we didn't like fight for anything, we didn't get anything, but considering it was a House majority for Republicans, and considering people thought we were going to lose a lot more, I don't understand why there's not just like a little bit to be happy about there.
No, nothing, zero. Okay, so let me explain.
Okay.
So, look, brother, when you say political analysts expected that it would be worse, well, first of all, that's corporate media, and corporate media always thinks the country is center right. That the Republicans are right on the debt and deficit. I mean, they're clowns. Trump drove up the deficit by the debt by $7.8 trillion. Reagan, Bush, they all drive up deficits. Last Republican president to balance the budget was Dwight Eisenhower. Okay, but what does corporate media always tell you? Oh, the Republicans care about the debt. They care about the deficit. It's a lie. Lie. Okay, so when they say, oh, okay. Oh, but Biden has to give everything to the Republicans. He didn't give them everything. He gave them only 89%. Oh, what a champion. Well, yeah, corporate politicians are happy. Corporate Democrats are happy. Corporate Republicans are happy. Corporate media is happy. So that's not an argument at all, in my opinion. Okay, so you have to look at the actual policy, right? So what actually happened there? Well, are you right that the Republicans threatened to punch us in the face about 100 times? Yes. So, but when we get punched in the face 80 times, and then we get one thing back, that's the one that I mentioned on Snap, that's not a win. You got punched in the face 80 times. And Stephen, we didn't need it at all. The 14th Amendment is crystal clear. It says our debt shall not be questioned. It's one of the clearest amendments there is. The only reason you even entered the negotiations is if you want to give things away. And so I'll give you two of the specific examples that you mentioned, okay? So for example, on work requirements, and corporate media always moves the goalpost, okay? On work requirements, first they came and oh, the Democrats said no way. And corporate media says, Democrats say no way, they're gonna stand strong. Hakeem Jeffries puts out a strong statement. Oh, we will not bend on that. And then when they collapse, complete utter collapse, right? And then, again, God bless, at least we got the veterans and the homeless, okay? But they collapsed on the work requirements that they said they would not budge on. Then corporate media goes, what a wonderful bipartisan compromise. It's a good thing we have work requirements. Wait, what the hell happened? Okay, I covered when you said X. Now I'm covering when you say Y. And those things are not at all the same. On student debt, classic trick. So what did he give? He gave the Republicans ending the moratorium in September, so you're gonna have to start paying interest again on your loans, okay? But they said, all right, but we're not gonna take away the student debt forgiveness. He knows the Supreme Court's gonna strike that down in 2 weeks. Biden knows that, so that way he gets to give away the store and then go, the favorite thing of corporate Democrats. There was nothing we could do. There was nothing we could do. Oh, the Supreme Court, golly gee, did they end my student debt relief program? The one thing that was gonna help young people? Oops, I did it again. So no, not buying it.
What is this?
Okay.
What is this energy? I'm sorry. Like, there's a lot being said here, but I'm just letting the debate like process for a bit. I'm just letting them go back and forth for a bit. I don't want to interrupt too much. What is Cenk's mood here? He's very sassy, very humorous mood, man. He's being a little he's been a little troll today. I don't know what's up. I've never seen Cenk like this. Maybe I don't watch enough Cenk Uygur.
Firstly, okay, this is a huge grab I have sometimes with progressives. I think we have to stop relying on these like Hail Mary legal arguments that we think or hope are going to bail us out of having to do any sort of legislative compromise. The idea that the 14th Amendment is crystal clear, that we both know that is absolutely not true. One of us might think that, and some people might think that, but that is a hotly contested thing. Not only is it hotly contested, it would be so contested that if we were to go that 14th Amendment route, there was a chance that the legal challenges would extend that past the expiration date of our debt. And if we default on our debt while we're trying to play complicated legal battles on whether or not the 14th Amendment allows us to just pay the debt with absolutely no negotiation with Congress required, that could potentially be like, I don't think I need to explain how disastrous it would be for the United States to default on its debt while we play this political football back and forth with the debt. So I don't buy that the 14th Amendment was such an easy way out, number one. Number two, as much as we hate it, well, I don't hate it. I mean, it's part of how our system works. Bipartisan is not the enemy. Bipartisan is not evil. If you don't have majorities or supermajorities in both of your houses, bipartisan is the way that you have to go. You know, even you mentioned that $15 an hour minimum wage hike earlier. That $15 an hour minimum wage thing in the Senate, that was opposed by 8 Democrats. And that's when you only winning by a vice president tiebreaker.
That's what I was talking about, man. Because for me, when I don't remember the 8 Democrats, but I do remember Manchin and Sinema being very astute in their opposition. And not to mention the fact that even if they were able to get every single Democrat to sign on, they would then have to overrule what I believe was the Senate parliamentarians' ruling on the $15 minimum wage being eked into the, I believe they were trying to eke it into the budget, or so, I forget exactly. They were trying to use like a workaround so they didn't need the supermajority that is usually needed, like the 60 plus vote majority, 66 plus vote majority that would usually be needed in order to pass something like $15 minimum wage. They would need to then overrule, Kamala Harris would then need to get herself involved and overrule the Senate parliamentarian to allow it to go through. So you would need to get a bunch of votes that you didn't have before then overruling the Senate parliamentarian on what she has stated would not be allowed. And I'm not saying it's impossible, and I'm not even saying that maybe there's no scenario where I would be okay with overruling the Senate parliamentarian. If we can play hardball to help working people, I understand it. But if we didn't have the votes, we didn't have the votes, and there's no workaround to that.
Vote. Like, there's no way that you can get through anything that is going to help the American people if you're not looking to be bipartisan.
The thing that's really frustrating was I asked people, like, okay, what could we have done in order to get it through then? Because usually people will say, well, pressure the people involved, pressure the Democrats that are not voting in favor of the $50 minimum wage. What pressure should we apply? Are we going to run a primary candidate against Joe Manchin, who's most likely not going to be the senator from West Virginia anyway, because he's being ran against by the governor of West Virginia, which is more popular than him. And now we're waiting to see if he's going to shift over to the governorship of West Virginia. We're waiting to see what's going to happen next. But that, like, what are we going to do? Primary Joe Manchin? At least Kirsten Sinema makes a little bit more sense. But someone like Joe Manchin, it's a lot more difficult to make a primary argument or political pressure argument.
Partisan in some way. You brought up the moratorium on student debt. That moratorium was expiring anyway. Student debt was always going to be, the interest payments were always coming back on the table at the end of summer. That was a freebie, a literal freebie. Republicans got nothing there. And then when you talk about the Supreme Court striking down student debt forgiveness, that's the $10,000 to $20,000 that Biden is trying to strike down. But the $42 billion that he's already forgiven for a lot of public workers, people working in healthcare, people that have like employment jobs by the federal government, that $42 billion that has been forgiven for young people, that's done. That's a done deal. Republicans didn't claw any of it back. The Supreme Court can't take any of that back. The only thing that they're fighting over now in the Supreme Court is going to be that $10,000 to $20,000 forgiveness per person afterwards. Again, I agree that like there were some things that like the $20 billion. I like the IRS. Okay, clawing back, and it's the only fucking organization in the government that actually makes money. Okay, so that's the dumbest thing to take away money from. But only losing $20 billion out of the $80 billion that we funded for it, that's probably the biggest punch in the face that I can see. And
I do agree. I do think the $20 billion on the IRS stuff. The IRS stuff was such a W for Democrats, and it pissed off Republicans so much. You shouldn't have allowed them to crawl that to scratch that away, especially when we're talking about debt ceiling negotiations. If anything, I think there should have been a bigger push from the Biden administration on the IRS point, where look. We are right now having negotiations about raising the debt ceiling. We hear from our Republican colleagues that our spending is out of control, that we're not physically responsible, and we're not fiscally responsible enough. It's getting out of control, putting aside the fact that 25% of our national debt was built during the Trump administration. And we didn't see the Republicans fighting tooth and nail to try to slash the military budget during the Trump administration in order to salvage whatever we can to stop us having to reach the debt ceiling. We didn't see that during the Trump administration. They were willing to spend, cut taxes, cut taxes, as 80% of those benefits of those cut taxes going to the top 1% of the 1% of the United States, not going to working class people. And the stuff that was for working class people, the little bit that they did get was phased out over time. It was terrible budget management during the Trump administration, and only worsened by COVID and Trump's improper handling, or let's just say pretty spotty handling of the COVID pandemic and spotty messaging on the COVID pandemic. So now we're in the Biden administration. We're heading into another round of debt negotiations after the Republicans made a mess of the federal budget, just like they did in 2008, just like they did with going into Iraq, just like they did with the invasion of Iraq, built on lies. And you want to take money away from the one organization that is needed to help manage a balanced budget, to bring in resources for the federal government, the agency that we know, we know that if we gave more resources to, they could take more out through taxation, through hunting down these people in the Cayman Islands, through going after the people who are dodging taxes or trying to find loopholes to get out of not paying their fair share into the United States federal government. It doesn't make any sense. I do think the messaging could have been more aggressive on it. I just think maybe there was some hesitation to run hard in favor of the IRS going into a presidential election, but I think the messaging is there. I think we could do it. I think the messaging can go on that. No, that would be terrible. One-party systems have a terrible authoritarian record. A multi-party coalition, though, would be... I have no clue what you're responding to. You can't be responding to me because I said nothing about coalitions and parliament or whatever.
Ending caps, but man, they originally McCarthy wanted all 80 billion back. Originally McCarthy wanted those caps at 540 billion dollars, and we got that up to 711 billion dollars. There were some punches, but I don't think it was like 89% punches in the face. I think it was like 15% punches in the face.
Okay, so let me address those one by one.
Go.
I'm going to read you the 14th Amendment here. The validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law shall not be questioned. Okay. So you called it a Hail Mary.
Mm-hmm.
If that's not clear enough, then words have no meaning. Okay. So, and not only that, Stephen, first of all, you don't have to do anything. You just simply keep doing what you're doing, let the Republicans, and say you're using the 14th Amendment, our debt shall not be questioned. The Republicans go to court, okay? If they want to, go ahead, go for it. Try to destroy the 14th Amendment, try to destroy the economy. Now you 100% own it because you went to court to try to destroy the economy, okay? You go to court, that puts the conservative Supreme Court in a very tough position, okay? Because they either have to say, okay, the Democrats are obviously right, plain reading of the language, the original meaning, everything, every conservative legal principle they have ever said. Or they have to say, okay, we're just partisan hacks, which I grant you that they might, and we don't care anything that we ever said before, but now we're burning our original meaning and plain reading of the text, are two of the pillars of conservative legal principles. We're burning it to the ground because this is super clear, and we're just going to lie about it. Okay.
Okay.
So that is not a Hail Mary. We have a massively winning case, and in fact, we win either direction there. And if you care just about politics and the Republicans own destroying the economy.
Dude, I wish I could say something, but I don't know if Cenk is a lawyer or if who's he's spoken with that is this confident in the argument. I'm not a lawyer. I can't really argue it. I mean, I can like question about the level of confidence Cenk has, but I'm not a lawyer. There's so little I can say here.
That's a disaster for them. Now, I care that we don't actually destroy the economy, right? And of course, defaulting on the debt is a terrible thing. But Stephen, this is another core disagreement, I think, because I think the politicians are completely controlled by their donors. And I think every piece of legislation shows that. So the Republicans were never actually going to default because their donors would have been livid. Their donors are the richest people in the country. They need that stock market healthy and vibrant. They would have cut those guys' throats if they had actually defaulted on debt ceiling. The trick is we pretend we're going to cut it. And those are the bad cops. And then the good cops come in. Democrats go, oh, God, well, golly, gee, I wish there was something that we could.
Can I also just say that, the United States kind of like fiddling around with the idea of defaulting on our debt every few years is extremely bad for trying to increase confidence in the United States as a reliable trading partner and ally. Just throwing that out there.
But there's nothing we could do. Hey, our donors are happy too. Oh, that's amazing.
I just want to throw out there that the more excessive and brutal and close to the finish line these debt ceiling debates get, the bigger actual national security risk it poses to the United States standing in the world. I mean, like, not only our economic health abroad and our influence when it comes to, you know, how much weight the dollar carries, which is very useful to us. It makes us more able to use our funds more freely, but also just when it comes to the health of our domestic economy. It is not a fun thing to play with, man. It is not a fun thing to play with.
Okay, what a win for everyone. And two policy things that you mentioned there. One is when you talk about the IRS, so we both agreed that that was a good bill that the Democrats passed. Now they're giving back a quarter of it to 20%, to 20 billion. Why doesn't Biden ever fight back rhetorically? Why doesn't he say, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were reducing the deficit. Taking away $20 billion from the IRS actually increases the deficit by approximately $120 billion.
Oh, Cenk's making my argument now. This is a good point.
Because every nonpartisan organization that's looked at it.
That's a good point. I mean, the easy answer to this question, though, if you want to be that guy, is easily because Joe Biden's bunker Biden. He doesn't like doing the interviews. He doesn't like pushing stuff in public. But then the argument could be, even if you bought that narrative, and I don't buy that narrative in its entirety. I think Joe Biden still can do a stump speech. I don't think he's the best public speaker in the world, but I still think he can. I've seen him do it. It's the worst moments are always going to be the stuff that gets clipped. But assuming that we really focus on the worst aspects of Joe Biden's electability, his lack of top tier speaking skills, they could get somebody else to do it. They can get Pete Buttigieg to do it. They could get Kamala Harris to do it. They could get any number of people to do it. It's not like if Kamala Harris does it and it leads to like a bad rub on her because she's tied herself to the IRS, her polling numbers could go any lower. She's polling pretty terribly as it is.
$1 spent at the IRS brings you $6 back in revenue for the government. So why doesn't he do a press conference? Go, my Republican friends, and he loves them. He's always calls them his Republican friends. My Republican friends, I thought they cared about the debt. It turns out they want to destroy the debt in order to protect the rich. Because this is targeted at people making over $400,000, and they want to pile on debt just to protect the rich. I won't have it. I'm going to fight for you. And he never does that because he doesn't believe that. And then last thing on this, pay-go on the executive side. We've talked about, like,
I don't know. The thing is, it's really hard to read people's intentions, and it's very difficult for me to just say Joe Biden wanted to cut $20 billion out of IRS funding. That does not make any sense to me. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would they have allocated the $80 billion for the IRS funding if they're just going to cut $20 billion off the top once they've got, you know, the budget gun pointed at the forehead of our country? To me, I'm not nearly as confident in Joe, as I was about to call him, Joe Biden, in Cenk Uygur, and saying that Joe Biden wanted to get rid of it. If he wouldn't have attempted the legislative achievement in the first place if they wanted to get rid of it.
Like 8 different things to give away. One,
you can like say, oh, he's too willing to compromise or something like that. You can't. I think he's writing in the intent. He's filling in the blanks here a little too much.
one of them is pay-go. And that means that if you do any executive action, I mean, they weren't going to pass any bills anyway, but if you do any executive action, the only thing he's got left for the next 2 years, now you have to take away something if you're ever going to spend money on anything. But that basically neuters the White House, the executive branch. Well, now, why did Biden throw that in? Because he wants to be neutered. That takes the pressure off. Then I could just run for president, only care about myself. I wasn't going to do anything in the next.
It's hard for me to believe that somebody holding a political office would actively decide of their own fruition to lower the amount of influence and power they have in that political office. There's very few people who have done that in history, and most of the people who have done that in history are like, I don't know, it's like, what's that one tale of like the Roman general who went out there and won the war, then went back to his farm? Those people are actually quite few and far between.
Next 2 years anyway, and it's nice and convenient for them. So Biden wins, the Republicans win, corporate media wins, we all get screwed.
Okay, so something we're going to center around this is like Biden wants this and the Democrats want this. I guess running through a couple of these, amendments are never as clear as like the words have crystal clear meaning, right? Like how many times have we fought over the wording of the Second Amendment? The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. What does it mean to have a well-regulated militia? What do the commas mean? How many times have we seen videos of like sovereign citizens quoting articles of independence and everything? Like the idea that like, well, the words are crystal clear, especially after we've just gotten out of a very, very, very complicated battle relating to Roe v. Wade and whether or not substantive due process or implied rights are even a real thing. I think it's very cautious, or I think we should proceed with caution when we say something like, oh yeah, like the wording on this particular part of the Constitution is very clear, therefore we have no debt ceiling anymore, especially when we're doing such a massive divergence of what's already kind of been set as like a political norm. Not to say that that battle can't be won, but like if on one end we've got, okay, well, we can negotiate a little bit with the Republicans, they won the House anyway, and for the most part we don't take too many big hits, or on the other hand, we could gamble with the future of the world, but we maybe are going to win. That just seems like such a clear-cut alternative. Like, probably just go with a negotiated position rather than, one, hoping that we win in court, or two, hoping that if we lose in court, the sitting president isn't blamed and the Republicans...
At Dylan Burns, what do you think Biden's biggest accomplishment and biggest failure is? I think his biggest I mean, I'm biased here, but I think his organized response to the Russian invasion in Ukraine is something that Donald Trump couldn't have done. He would have been incompetent in doing it, wouldn't have had the skills necessary to do it, wouldn't have had the experience in the foreign relations committee in the Senate that Joe Biden has, wouldn't have the experiment. I think really just the basic foreign policy experience to manage it. Not that I think he would even care to do it. Whereas in Joe Biden was able to organize an international coalition to support Ukraine, pushing countries like Germany to go much further than anybody could have anticipated with aid, like, for example, Leopard tanks, etc. On the first day of the invasion, I was going to be surprised if the German government even agreed to kick out certain Russian banks from the country, and they went all the way to tanks. It's much further than I thought was possible. Not that I didn't want that. I always wanted to see Ukraine get supported. I just didn't expect him to be able to do it to certain countries like Germany, for example, which are highly reliant on Russian energy exports. That was really good work from Biden. There's some other things I can talk about. I can talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. I can talk about NLRB appointments, and I can talk about other things, but obviously that's like the thing that I care about the most. And I don't want to ramble too much about all the little things that I like that Biden did. As for his biggest failure, oh my goodness, what is the Biden administration's biggest failure? I don't think they've been aggressive enough on trying to end a drug war. That's a pretty big failure to me. And I mean, even in the messaging side of things, they just have not been strong enough. I believe, I'm trying to remember the the railroad strike. Somebody brought that up. I was not very happy with the railroad strike. I was not happy with how the Biden administration responded to that. But everybody who's watched my channel long enough knows that I'm always sympathetic with labor. But I think that's for good reason. And you know what? I mean, I support the Afghanistan withdrawal. That was an achievement, but it was done sloppily. It was not that organized. And I say this after talking to people who were there. I'm not saying this as, all withdrawals are sloppily. Like we had like 13 American deaths. We had people falling from planes, right? Like, I mean, literally falling from planes. It is hard for somebody to convince me that it could get any worse than that. And Biden's response to that was piss poor when he was asked about the people falling from planes. Like he basically dismissed it, which was very tone deaf. What other failures? And I don't want to get too into it, but you guys have a general idea of what I listing as achievements and failures. Oh, also not re-entering, trying to normalize relations with Cuba is another failure I'm not very happy with. They're not doing that fast enough.
Get blamed, which I don't even know if that helps us anyway, because it's not like the composition of the Supreme Court is going to change. And now all we've got is a country that can blame the Republicans for the fact that we've destroyed the world economy. It reminds me of the, there's like I think it's like 5 people are sitting in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and they're like, man, we destroyed the whole world, but we sure did create some good short-term value for our shareholders for a brief period of time or whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't know if that's the kind of battle we want to be getting into. I mean, I understand the arguments for it, but man, in terms of like, why doesn't Biden fight back? this gets into kind of like, oh, well, you know, political theory and what are people doing. But like my interpretation of it, and I think quite a few people have had this interpretation, is that this was such an astoundingly good deal for Democrats, considering how bad it could have gone, that it's better to just shut up and let McCarthy and McConnell go out and say, oh, well, we're very proud to vote for this, and let them have their win when we're not really giving much at all, so that McCarthy's position in the House isn't threatened, and so that Republicans aren't in an uproar that they weren't able to attack any of the entitlement programs, any of our big non-discretionary spending stuff like they've really wanted to do. Republicans have been gunning for things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Republicans have been bloodthirsty to get rid of all of the student loan forgiveness, to claw that back completely. Republicans have been hungry to make huge cuts in the Inflation Reduction Act. They wanted to get rid of all the tax credits, all those green energy tax credits. McCarthy in the House bill got rid of every single thing. And again, the things that we gave were not that significant. You mentioned PAYGO, for instance. First of all, in October of 2019, Trump already had enacted PAYGO for the executive branch via executive order, number one. And number two, the PAYGO that was enacted, one, it sunsets at the end of 2024, so it's not that big of a deal. And two, the most important part...
Biden doesn't do anything anyway.
What? He might not do anything anyway. But regardless, number two, the PAYGO requirements for the executive branch are exempt from judicial review. Line 17, 18, 19, no determination, finding, action, or omission under this title shall be subject to judicial review. So basically, Biden can say, listen, I'm doing this on EO because I have good reasons, trust me, and it's not like anybody can review it anyway. So again, I feel like this is one of those things where it's like, we gave it, and then some people, like you guys at the Young Turks and other people, are like, oh my God, this is a horrible thing the Democrats gave. But I think the reason why Biden and the Democrats are being quiet on it is like, okay, listen, yeah, guys, the Republicans sure did win here, but at the end of the day, really all we lost was like the $20 billion over the next 3 years, I guess, for the IRS. And for the most part, I don't think anything else really mattered.
God, I wish there was more of like a public push on that front, man. There has to be a public push on that front if we're ever going to be able to up the funding for the IRS in the long term and make it politically difficult for the Republicans to push back on it. And it's going to be necessary if we're going to be able to like deal with the, I mean, gargantuan size of the United States federal government at this point. It's going to be necessary. We got to bite this bullet at some point, man. We can't just keep kicking it down the road. We gotta become warriors for the IRS. Okay, we need to get in the trenches for our boys in blue. For the real boys in blue, okay?
That much. And then you can respond to any of that if you want. And then it's just like kind of my broader thing. You keep saying this thing where it's like Biden wants to do nothing. The Democrats don't want to do anything. All their corporate donors own them. Do we really feel that way? And then you can respond to anything you want. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so look, we haven't even discussed a bunch of the things they gave away, like the $30 billion in COVID relief bill. Now, you could say they weren't going to spend it, but I would say, well, then why not? They should have spent it. They should have spent it helping the average American. We passed that. It was a rare good thing that we passed. For God's sake, get it to the average American. So we gave away $30 billion there, $20 billion to the IRS, on and it goes. But, Stephen, the larger point is, if you allow the Republicans to keep taking hostages, they will take hostages to the end of time. So someone has to be strong enough, like LBJ on economic issues, FDR, and say, hey, I'm drawing the line.
I like that he's explicitly said on economic issues. They didn't want to, not on LBJ and everything exactly, okay? And I don't really know, okay, roll back it on the, but just on the economic issues. But yeah, I'm LBJ economic stand.
If you don't ever draw the line, every time the Republicans are in office, like Trump, they never talk about the debt ceiling. In fact, we talked about it today on the Young Turks. Steve Bannon was there the first time they raised the debt ceiling under Trump.
Dylan, do you have a problem in the United States when president is credited with more failures than the position of president is even responsible for? Well, yeah, the buck has to stop somewhere. And for a lot of people, it's very easy for that to be the president of the United States. Right? If there was some economic crisis created in like China tomorrow due to like a housing bubble pop or like who knows what it would be, and the like the outflows of that affected the United States, even if Biden did his best to like ride the storm and keep America stable, financially strong, even if he did a good job, there is a chance that if not properly like covered, if not properly presented, that his approval rating could still go down, even if he handled the situation better than anybody else could have. That just, he was in the wrong time and place to be popular in the United States. Dayjuice, thank you so much for the primer. I appreciate it. Some people actually lay this scenario at the feet of the Carter administration, which, you know, led to big old Ronnie, Mr. Ronnie with the monkey, getting into office.
Now he's like, oh, all the Republicans should be primaried if they voted for this thing. What are you guys talking about? You passed it without a single word, right? So why not pound them on that? Why not say Steve Bannon did it, Donald Trump did it, etc.? Biden doesn't want to fight back because he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it in his heart. If you put me in the ring, by the way, Stephen, probably if you put you in the ring, you'd fight back.
Well, I mean, Cenk tried to enter the ring. He ran for Congress. I think he got like 5%, right? What was Cenk Uygur's election results? Does anybody remember? And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just saying that, like, there's a reason why Cenk Uygur isn't in the ring, and he's a political commentator. The skills of being a political commentator and being a politician are very different. Very, 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 very different. Does anybody? I don't remember his exact election results. I remember him like getting like 5%.
Back 10,000 times more. Why? Because you believe it. He doesn't. He wants them to take those hostages. So, but it doesn't matter. Assume that he's a saint and he doesn't agree with the Republicans. And golly gee, he doesn't know how to use his
and Dayjuice, thanks for the prime. I appreciate it.
mouth. He doesn't know how to fight back. But that principle, that idea that we just give in to Republicans and we accept loss after loss after loss and go, well, the losses could have been worse. Well, then every time a Democrat gets elected, instead of us winning, we're going to wind up losing. And that's exactly what's happening here. They're like, hey, don't worry, elect us. We'll get you voting rights. We'll get you minimum wage. We'll get you public option. We'll get you paid family. We'll get you all this stuff. And then you go, oh, no. When a Democrat's in charge, we obviously lose because the other side takes hostages and we immediately give in. And when you say, hey, isn't bipartisan a good thing? My answer to that is, fuck no, okay? So it depends on what we're agreeing to. So bipartisan by itself doesn't mean anything. So if you say bipartisan agreement.
Oh my God, look at that. 6.6%, fourth place, huh? Ay. That is not a great result. It is not a great result. I mean, hey, it is what it is, you know. He ran. I respect him at least for, you know, trying, doing it, throwing his hat in the ring. Where were we?
And for example, under Trump, even Gates and some of the other guys that were very right-wing came in and said, no, we have bipartisan agreement with the progressives that the president must come to authorize war through Congress. Well, I love that bipartisan agreement because that's a thing I agree on. When they have bipartisan agreement to take money from the average American and give it to the richest people in America, which is the bipartisan agreement that they reach 95% of the time, I hate that bipartisan agreement. To me, being bipartisan is not a value in and of itself. It's just a method to get to a policy that's either good or bad. And the press and Biden, et cetera, celebrate it because it's a head fake. It's a distraction. Oh, what we did was terrible, but don't worry. It's moderate. It's bipartisan, these code words that we have trained you to believe are positive, even when you're getting totally screwed on it. And so, and the last thing I'll say is, that, you know, you mentioned a couple of times, hey, at least we didn't get Social Security, Medicare taken away, et cetera. Stephen, you got to acknowledge that's the lowest bar in history. Like, we get the Democrats, the White House, the House and the Senate in the first 2 years. And now, okay, we lost the House by a little bit. And now our bar is we didn't let the Republicans mutilate Social Security and Medicare. No, and plus, you got to be honest. I don't mean you, I mean Biden and the Democrats. When you say one thing and then you get into office and you change your tune immediately, you go from, I'm going to do it on day one to, oh, it can't be done. There's no way it can be done. Oh, you're lucky I didn't bleed out even more while I was in charge.
Okay. So, okay, here, this should be a rule for every online political commentator, okay? I hate it when people compare Biden to like JFK or Lyndon B. Johnson or any of these prior administrations without looking at the majorities that those guys had in their House and Senate. Biden is fighting for his life, okay? Not only literally, okay, this guy's very old, all right? We saw him trip, okay, a few days ago. Biden is literally and metaphorically fighting for his life every single day he gets out and talks to Congress, okay? He is riding the thinnest fucking majorities, okay, historically, that presidents have ever had. And then we're looking at this guy and it's like, really? You've got got the vice president as a tiebreaker in the Senate, and you haven't given us single-payer health care yet. You haven't completely dismantled the military-industrial complex. We don't have 15 an hour minimum wage. Where are you doing, Mr. President? Biden is doing everything he can. And that's why I think that as much as it triggers the hell out of some people, I think bipartisanship is an incredibly important step. I think that I'm going to do the progressive thing of like diversity is good for diversity's sake. I think bipartisanship is good for bipartisan's sake because a lot of the issues that we've had running our federal government over the past 20 years have literally been Congress does nothing and we look to the president for executive actions. Even our big immigration policy like DACA came from Obama executive action, or we look to the Supreme Court for everything. All of our civil rights, all of our big civil right legislation, where is that? It doesn't exist. It's come from the Supreme Court. Gay marriage came from the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade, Casey came from the Supreme Court. And what happens to things that come from the Supreme Court? The next Supreme Court can take them away. What happens to things that come from executive action? The next executive action or the next Supreme Court can take them away.
This is part of the reason why people were so angry that there was not that we did not enshrine the protections of abortion and women's right to choose outside of just like the legal argument, enshrining Roe v. Wade legislatively, so that if it's ever overturned, that they can, still have it legislatively. If it's overturned in the courts, then they could have it legislatively to still protect women. Sadly, that was not a priority, and in the few times where it was a priority, the majorities were either extremely short-lived or there were like members of the majority that were sick that made it not able for a number of reasons that didn't end up happening, and now we're feeling the terrible consequences of that.
And I think that this hyperfixation on, screw bipartisanship, we're just going to fight with our end of the political spectrum. Our end of the political spectrum is barely winning in the Senate, is no longer winning in the House. One
second. I want to look at something in chat. This is from Manic Kanye. Turns out Ukraine did the Nord Stream attack. Wonder if there's any old clips of Dylan talking about Nord Stream. Lamau. Is there? Link it. What did I say about Nord Stream? What was my stance on Nord Stream? Number one, prove that Ukraine did it, because I know there's like a report in the Washington Post saying that that the Ukrainian government were like considering something, or they considered something along those lines. This is the first thing. Number two, and what did I say about Nord Stream? You can come in here right now and you can talk to me about it. Exclamation point Discord and chat. You can come in here and you can confront me about what my terrible position of Nord Stream was. Perfectly willing to talk about it at any time, because my always position on Nord Stream has always been, I don't know, man. I don't know who did it. We don't have enough evidence to conclude who did it. It was me who did it, honestly. I did it. I did Nord Stream. I blew it up, and I'll do it again. I'll do it again. It's never been an issue that I particularly care about anyway. Because I don't really, if the Ukrainians did blow it up, it probably would not have a tremendous impact on my view of supporting Ukraine. But again, I don't know who did it. And is that a dangerous thing to say, by the way? I think on the internet, it is a dangerous thing to say sometimes. I don't know. I think a lot of people online would probably lead their audiences better. Even though, of course, your guys aren't like my disciples or something, but you guys would be led better generally if we had more people online. When asked complicated questions or questions they don't have all the information for, they just said, I don't know. But saying I don't know makes you look non-confident. And I think there's a decent chunk of the people who are involved in political commentary who succeed in political commentary, not because they say the most intelligent things, not because they give the best commentary, but because they say those things confidently. And they say it enough within a preordained narrative that they jumped onto. And so they jumped into that pre-existing audience who already believes in that narrative. They say the same things over and over and over again, very confidently, don't need to know other facts, and they build an audience. And I think those people being whittled out would be fantastic for online dialogue. Just say I don't know. It's not that hard to say I don't know when you ask a question you don't know about. I know it's difficult to look for the tiniest of moments, like you have the slightest bit of weakness, but it would be better for online dialogue. It honestly would be better for a country too. Could you imagine if Tucker Carlson, when he was about to say some bullshit, just said I don't know? Hell, I think Tucker Carlson's even admitted, I don't know if it was post Fox firing or before Fox firing, that if he's ever cornered, he'll just lie his way out of a debate. And the fact that anybody The fact that people are willing to do that in the first place is bad, but the fact that he felt confident enough to say that in public and so secure enough to say that in public leads me to believe that there's a lot of people not only working in the online space, but also in the public, like big establishment media space, who, as a matter of practice, engage dishonestly.
I think that focusing on some level of bipartisanship, I think in and of itself is a good, because we have to be able to bring people in Congress to work together again. This relying on the Supreme Court, especially now with a fucked 6-3 Supreme Court, and this relying on executive action is not a good way to conduct affairs, because any gain we make can be lost at the snap of a finger. Number one, and number two, I feel like the bipartisan push is credited to Biden, because when we look at Democrats, so for instance, you said we gave Democrats the House, we gave Democrats the Senate, we didn't give them the courts, and we gave Democrats the presidency, and then look at what we've done. We've gotten the American Recovery Act, we got the infrastructure bill, we got massive legislation. What did Trump do when he had all 3 and then 4 parts of government? Trump did nothing. He did his big tax cut bill, and that was it. They didn't repeal and replace Obamacare, which I think Republicans have been jerking off about doing for 8 years. Okay, they didn't repeal or replace Obamacare. They didn't make any of the big entitlement cuts they wanted to. They didn't even get their wall funding that they were talking about so much. Trump had to do it via executive action because the president gets wide deference and matters.
They did the Muslim ban. Oh, I'm sorry. The travel ban from a lot of Muslim majority countries, and then North Korea added afterwards in order to make it not a Muslim ban. After Trump explicitly said on the campaign trail that he wanted to ban Muslims. But I mean, that was undone immediately once Biden went into office. A lot of the stuff that was quote unquote Trump's legislative accomplishments that Trump tries to like tout around were things that were immediately undone once a different chief executive was in the White House. It's the long-term effect of basically, I think 99.9% of Trump's executive orders are not going to be felt past his lifetime.
State security, and they didn't even get the infrastructure bill passed that they said over and over again. Trump said, I could bring people together on infrastructure. He didn't. So the fact that Biden, I understand, especially as a progressive, especially when we want politics to be way further to the left, that idea of like, well, just because it's bipartisan doesn't mean it's good. I understand wanting to
travel ban was an executive order, not a legislative achievement. No. I was giving an example of the things that Trump did achieve, but most of them, like the travel ban, were executive orders, things that could immediately be undone once he left the White House. Why is that the case? Because Trump doesn't know what he's doing. He's never been a politician before. Then you make him the most powerful man in the fucking country, and he's clueless. That's why he didn't have any foreign policy achievements. That's why he didn't have any legislative achievements outside of the tax cuts, which, by the way, as we said earlier, 80 to 90% of which benefited the top echelons of society, not the people most struggling economically.
fight against that. But man, when Congress is like so defunct, I think that being able to get anything passed, let alone the massive legislation Biden has gotten passed, I think he gets credit for that. And I think there's credit where credit is due there.
Okay, so first, Trump actually did the one thing that he and the Republicans cared about, the only thing they care about, which is tax cuts for the rich. So that was 100% mission accomplished. The rest was just, rhetoric. It's like, oh, I'm going to build a wall. He barely even tried until the end, right?
I don't think that tax cuts for the rich is the only thing that the Republican Party is interested in. I don't think that's true. I mean, obviously, his tax bill was fucking horrendous, and I really wish he didn't get it through. But I don't think that's honest. There was more stuff that Trump tried to get done. Trump literally tried to put in place a Muslim ban. Rudy Giuliani admitted this on Fox and Friends, that Trump came to him and asked him, how do we ban Muslims legally? And then he was told, like, well, you can't just ban all the members of a religious group. And so they then tried to go out and ban Muslim majority countries, people from Muslim majority countries coming to the United States. Once it was clearly shown to be a Muslim ban, that got pushed back against, and they had to expand it. That was something he was actively attempting to do, which got undermined by the court systems along the way before being put through and then undone after his administration left. And there's a bunch of little things like that and different things that Trump tried to achieve during his administration that were just like that. But the tax cuts obviously were, in my opinion, probably the longest lasting legislative impact Donald Trump is going to have in the country.
So we all know he's a giant liar. We all agree to that, right, et cetera. But the Republicans reveal themselves. What's the major thing that Ronald Reagan did? Giant tax cuts. What's the major thing that George W. Bush did? Giant tax cuts. What's the major thing that Trump did? Giant tax cuts, right? So they pass the things they want to pass. And every time, oh, golly gee, there was nothing Democrats could do, right? And when they come back in, so here's a great example, Stephen. So Trump and the Republicans butcher the tax rates, and they take corporate taxes from 35% to 21%. Okay, then Biden comes in and goes, "I'm going to raise those back up to 28%." And I was like, "Wait, hold on. They were at 35. What do you mean back up to 28?" So, okay, already you agree with the tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. Then Manchin says, "No, not 28, 25." And Biden instantly goes, "Okay, fine, 25." And then they drop it, and it's still at 21. So, A, he never fought for it. B, he never wanted to increase them back to where they were. That's a fact. There's no disputing that. And then C, he just didn't even try and loves them where they are. I say he loves them, and you can say, hey, no, I disagree with you, Cenk. Biden doesn't love that. He's just a pathetic ooze of weakness, and he just can't fight back on any of this stuff. And so now that brings us to the point that you made about, well, wait a minute, LBJ had big majorities. Did he? He had big majorities of Democrats. But remember, a giant portion of those Democrats were Dixiecrats. And we didn't just rely on the Supreme Court to pass legislation, to pass things that we agree with, policies, right? And it's kind of funny to say the Supreme Court is passing it, but that's
wait. But I thought that Cenk Uygur like gave an explicit exemption when it came to the he said LBJ on economics. What would be the economic stuff that he wasn't able to get out of the Dixiecrats? I can understand when it comes to like the civil rights stuff, which by the way he still got through, but I don't understand what he means by that when it comes to the economic level of this. Or I think maybe he just means this generally during the LBJ administration, that, a lot of those Dixiecrats would not align with him on civil rights issues.
That was the only functioning body we had left because, in my opinion, the donors bought everything else and that they loved the status quo. They ground everything to a halt except tax cuts for the rich. And so, but no, Lyndon Johnson passed the Voting Rights Act and he passed the Civil Rights Act and he passed them through Congress, and he passed them despite the fact that a giant percentage of his party were Dixiecrats who ran on segregation, on being racist, and it cost them their careers. But he actually fought. He fought like hell for it. And so did FDR. FDR said, "I welcome their hatred, and I'm going to defeat the Republicans' lust for greed." These are super strong words, and he would use words like that all the time. Which leads me to my other point, which is, how do you think they got those giant majorities? Remember, FDR took over from a Republican. It's not like it was already a big Democratic majority for him. No, he took over and built a giant Democratic majority by fighting for us, by getting results like Social Security and so many of the other things that he did after the Depression. And one thing now, back to the current day, you mentioned one thing I want to talk about. You strawmanned a little bit, and maybe you're not strawmanning for other people, but for me, I don't come in and go, "Oh my God, I want a single payer overnight." No, in fact, if you remember the
FDR had a supermajority on this first day. Actually, that would make sense, because in my mind, it wasn't just that FDR put forward like a more pro-working class agenda than the Republicans, which he did. It was also that the Republicans, and Herbert Hoover especially, were unable to respond to the incoming economic crisis. And so the American people, seeing the terrible position the American Depression had put them in, decided they needed a quick and radical change in government, and completely flipped the legislative chamber as well as the executive branch. That's what I remember, unless I am misremembering history.
The Jimmy Dore clowns did the force the vote in the beginning, and they're like, "We're going to force the Nancy Pelosi speaker vote thing so we can get a vote on Medicare for all." I'm like, guys, you're not going to win that. You have no alternative to Nancy Pelosi, and there's no chance Medicare for all passes. So why don't you do something that's actually winnable, use your leverage and power to ask for something we actually can win on, like, for example, $15 minimum wage, because they already promised it 8 ways to Sunday. They said they were definitely going to do it. So then you use all of your leverage and power to get the things that you can get done, because then you could build from there, right? So we didn't ask for the moon in the sky. We asked for very reasonable things that corporate Democrats said that they were in favor of. But instead, we didn't even get the bare minimum. Voting rights was supposed to be the bare minimum. And honestly, Stephen, that one shocked me. My bar, as you can tell, for establishment Democrats is very, very low. I have almost no expectations of them. But I thought they would do half the voting rights bill. The anti-corruption stuff written by Larry Lessig, godfather of campaign finance reform movement. I remember talking to Larry about it, and I said, brother, I love you, but there's no way in the world they're going to pass anti-corruption stuff. It's not just the Republicans. The Democrats are just as corrupt when it comes to taking campaign money. So that part has no hope. The gerrymandering thing would be brilliant, but I think very little hope, because the Democrats are also complicit in that. But the other half, they needed for their own victories. They needed black people to be able to vote so Democrats could win. But Biden wouldn't even do that. No, and Stephen, they betray themselves. Last thing here. Because there is one time they lifted the filibuster. They say, oh, the filibuster is immutable. The parliamentarian rules us. Does she? I didn't know we were in a parliamentarian system or parliament system. But no, they didn't give a damn about the parliamentarian. They did lift the filibuster once to raise the debt ceiling in the first 2 years. So when it affected the stock market, all of a sudden the filibuster is irrelevant. When it came to voting rights for African Americans, oh, no, nothing we could do. Filibuster, the Democrats' best friend.
I think so. We can move on from here. I'll give a thing and then you can give a quick, because obviously we can go back and forth this forever. I would like to contextualize where Biden sits at right now on the precipice of extremist disaster in U.S. history. We came off of what is arguably, I'm not going to say the most conservative president ever, because I don't even know if Trump is truly conservative, but I'll say like the most like fascist president ever, at least in my lifetime from what I've seen. We went from that to a
damn. Destiny used the F word. He used the word fascist. Oh, you don't see him do that often. That's how you know he's talking to a progressive, trying to speak trying to speak our language.
Crazy-backed conservative Supreme Court to a Republican House and Senate, and we have slingshotted from that all the way to Biden, and then a liberal majority in the Senate, barely, and House, Senate if you have vice president.
Most fascist president ever who has a Jewish son-in-law? Wait, okay. Fascism and anti-Semitism aren't inherently intertwined. In fact, you could be a Jewish fascist. That is a thing you could be. I don't understand why that would. I understand that the most popular fascist was known for his anti-Semitism, but you don't need to be an anti-Semite to be a fascist.
House, and then from there, after we went from the most fascist regime ever back to Biden, I will agree that it's not like we don't live in the progressive utopia, but we got legislation that is like giving out unbelievable amounts of stimulus to low-income Americans. When you talk about that expansion of the child tax credit, that was insane. When you talk about some of the huge investments in green energy we've made, I'm pretty sure the largest in U.S. history as part of the infrastructure bill, that was insane. When you talk about, I'm pretty sure the Respect for Marriage Act that got rid of the prior, I think, Defensive Marriage Act from the 90s, that we managed to codify some rights around gay marriage. That's insane. The fact that we were able to do these things after Trump, after we were at that extreme of a position, and then we came back and now we're at Biden and now we're fighting on these things. Again, I think he gets a lot of credit for that, for being legislatively more effective than Trump. He has been, and for doing this following what is probably the most divisive presidency in U.S. history. I don't think half of Republicans even fucking think that election was real still, because these guys are out here waiting for the magical Supreme Court decision that's going to overturn the prior election or whatever. I guess like the thing that I guess I'm kind of summarizing the list for is like, I don't know what Biden is supposed to do. We can talk about LBGA and the Dixiecrats, and we can talk about, well, these guys fought and they fought and they fought, but these guys had strong grounds to stand on. We are so divided as a country today. Like I said, I'm pretty sure over a quarter of Americans don't even believe the last election was real, and the stuff that we're fighting about today is so much more nebulous or amorphous than, like civil rights, right? Like, we probably should have the same civil rights across the entire country. That's a lot easier than how do we legislate like gerrymandering and, voting and everything in the United States. That gets a lot more hairy when we try to figure it out. So I guess, yeah, I agree that I wish that Biden could do more, but I'm not entirely sure what he can do. There's like no position for strategic maneuvering here. All it takes is like Manchin or Sinema to be like, you know what? I'm not going along with this. And it's like, well, fuck me. We got 49, 48 in the Senate. I guess we're done completely. And now we're just lame ducking it for, 4 years until, hopefully we do better in the next election.
Okay. I can go on forever on.
Sure. I'll give you the last word on this section. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So I'll try to keep it as short as I can. Look, yes, I think Trump is a fascist. I think he would end democracy. We agree there. But that's, again, a super low bar. Hey, I'm not Mussolini is not a great campaign slogan. And the child tax credit was fantastic. You go back to our videos, you'll see we give it a ton of credit for that. But as usual, once it ran out, they just dropped it. They never went back to it. So, like, they dropped every progressive proposal instantly. But that Mountain Valley pipeline for Joe Manchin, they brought it back 3-4 times.
Tax credit was fantastic. The child tax credit, I mean, like, cut child poverty almost in half in the United States. Almost in half. It was honestly astonishing. We really should have kept it. We didn't get to keep it. And I think it's something that the Democrats should be campaigning on again, saying this is the type of stuff that we can support that's pro-family. Turn that type of messaging on its head. The type of pro-family, family values campaign.
Until they finally put it in a bill for no reason at all. And they put it in because Joe Biden always wanted to do the Mountain Valley pipeline. Because Joe Biden is Joe Manchin. There was just so gratuitous to put that in the bill. Okay, and then finally, what can he do? Just a short version of it is paid family leaves at 84%. So you go out and you do press conference every single day. You have the largest microphone in the world. And you go, hey, 84%. Or do we live in a democracy or don't we? Did you know that 74% of Republicans want paid family leave? Did you know that Estonia has 82 weeks of paid family leave and we have none? Zero. You have a baby and the woman's supposed to go back.
Well, yeah, that's unbelievably embarrassing for the United States. I mean, hey, the thing that gets me at the paid family leave is apparently going into the 2016 election, that was consensus. Both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were in favor of paid family leave. Hillary, I think, wanted more time. Like, I think it was past 20 weeks, where like Trump was like, I don't know, like half a day, maybe. It was a short amount of time. I don't remember the exact amount of time Trump proposed. And then Trump gets in office, and then everybody just forgets about paid family leave. It was like the statement was never made, even though both the Democrat and Republican candidates supported it. Supposedly, if Trump really carried a lot of weight in Congress and the Democrats, are in favor of paid family leave, why couldn't Trump like get a few of them to be in favor of paid family leave? But it's just like the stimulus bill, where Donald Trump waited until the stimulus bill was dead in the water, and then he comes out and he's like, oh, I was always in favor of the stimulus bill. I was always in favor of the $2,000 checks going to everyone, and I would have been in favor of it. I would have been in favor of it if we could have done it, but it was too late. And he did it purposely. He waited till it was over, until the debate was over, to say, oh yes, I'm so in favor of the stimulus. I'm so in favor of these checks being sent to Americans.
Back into the coal mines, back into the assembly lines. Why are 3/4 of Republicans being ignored by their own politicians? That's because they're corrupt corporate lackeys. You fight, right? But Biden and corporate Democrats don't want to fight. They got no fight in them. I just wish they'd get the hell out of the way. So, like, that's why I formed Rebellion PAC in the first place. Let's get some grassroots funding, rebellionpac.com, okay? And let's go kick these guys' asses and show them how it's actually done.
I'm curious if we can find agreement here or not. I feel like, in my opinion, the best way to pass a more progressive agenda is to get people to vote out Republicans, as many Republicans as possible. That if the Democrats had wider margins in the House or the Senate, we'd see something get done differently. Because it feels like right now the fixation is like, okay, I know we've got very slim majorities, but we need to get rid of some of these Democrats. We need to get some more progressive Democrats in there. I feel like they'd be in the same position. Like you even said, like that force the vote on like Medicare for all. Like what's the point, right? If you don't have the majorities in Congress to get it done, but you don't agree with that, yeah? Would you?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I guarantee you that if they had a majority of 4, all of a sudden there would be 4 Democrats that were holding out, not just 2, like Manchin and Sinema. All of a sudden it'd be Coons and Carper as well. If they had a majority of 8, all of a sudden it would be 8 Democrats holding out, because I've covered.
It's such a base. I mean, I feel like this is where Cenk is entering fantasy land. The idea that if we had a larger majority of Democrats, let's go with the number 66, that it wouldn't be any easier to pass these agenda items is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I understand that even if there was to be a shift, there would still be people who hold out. And in fact, there would be people who hold out along these new lines, along these new arrangements. So if we were trying to pass something with 66 votes and we have 67, there's going to be 2 people holding at the line, trying to get everything they can. But it is going to be easier to pass stuff with the supermajority. It is going to be easier to get what we want into the budget. It is going to be easier for us to get the court appointments that we want. It's going to be easier for us to do do everything that, basically everything that we would want to get done. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get everything that we want done, because that's when the question of who makes up the party comes into play. But we would be able to get more of what we wanted to get done. And I'm telling you this, we would not be giving up $20 billion away from the IRS to properly manage a tax system if we had 66 votes in the House.
Over politics for 25 years, and I've seen them do it over and over and over again. And so and in fact, Jayapal just gave away the game. Theoretical head of the Progressive Caucus, or the caucus is theoretically progressive. And she said, well, look, we showed them, we voted no. Now, if they needed the votes, we would have given it to them, but we voted no to show that we disagree. Well, then you just gave away the game, brother, or sister in that case. Okay, so you're just saying, oh, we're just faking it out here. So however many Democratic votes they need to pass these awful bills, we'll always give it to them. But we're going to pretend that we're against this bill because they don't need our votes. That's the kind of gamesmanship that happens. And so, I mean, I guess that's a core disagreement. I don't think that they're golly gee honest people that went to Washington and Mr. Smith just couldn't pull it off. No, they all get massive funding from corporations, corporate donors, PACs, super PACs, and they do exactly as they're told.
But then if that's the case, then why engage with the political system at all? Because now we're back at the square zero. Because now it feels like, yeah, why bother voting or anything if they're all bought and paid for?
No. I don't want people to get discouraged. I'm captain of Team Hope. Okay, so that's why I helped to form Justice Democrats, because my thesis was if you untether people from corporate PAC money, they could actually be honest. And that's why, is it random that AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar were the most visible Democrats when they first got elected? And then Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, these are all big names you've heard over and over again.
Yeah, but they're winning in plus 40, but they're winning in plus 40 blue districts, right? This is why when the progressives were talking about like, well, we're going to get a progressive in for Manchin, they got slaughtered. That's why people like Nina Turner, even when they fundraise their opponent 2-1, get destroyed. I don't think there's much credit for progressives that are winning in massively blue districts and then attacking the rest of the Democratic Party from the safest seats of the United States.
No. So, Stephen, first of all, when we won a lot of those battles, they were not a given at all. AOC beating Joe Crowley in that primary was one of the biggest upsets in political history, in American history. And so now
that is true. I remember it happening the night of, man. I mean, Joe Crowley he was like third in line, man. It was Nancy, Steny Hoyer, who's actually my congressman, and then it was Joe Crowley. He was the third in line, man. Like, yeah, it was a gigantic upset. I remember the election night that it happened. I was sad because my person who was running for a local Central Democratic committee hearing, he didn't win. I was just doing some door knocking for them, but I was happy that AOC won. And I think that was the first time. I mean, I knew AOC's existence, but I did not think she was gonna win. I thought it was like a 1 in a million shot.
Turn impossible to inevitable, right? It was always going to happen. No, it wasn't. There was massive victories in there, okay? And so, but the reason that they fought loudly and strongly for their voters in the beginning was because they're not taking corporate PAC money. It's the donors that hold them back. Go, oh, don't do class warfare. Whoa, don't do that. Don't do this. Don't do that. That's why the corporate Democrats are always hiding. They're hiding in a cave. So, yes, no, there's something you could do. You vote in primaries first. Because one, you got to get the corrupt Democrats out because they're just going to vote with the Republicans anyway on economic issues. But number two, you actually need, when they get into office, for them to vote the right way and to be untethered from the corruption. And I'll give you an ironic example. Matt Gaetz, terrible guy, was on the show. We yelled at him. We yelled back and forth. Got no love for him, right? But he decided not to take corporate PAC money. And then
I watched it. It was a very strange interaction. I think Matt actually kind of, I mean, there were some mistakes he made in it, but I think he kind of ran circles around Cenk in that conversation, sadly.
Fourth, got no love for him, right? But he decided not to take corporate PAC money. And then lo and behold, he was the one Republican that proposed an anti-corruption bill. You got to get him out of the minute you detach them from the donors, they become honest, and they might be honestly awful like Matt Gaetz. They might be honestly wonderful like some of the Justice Democrats, but all of a sudden you get your democracy back a little bit. And so if you don't get money out of politics, then yes, in the long term it's hopeless. but we must get money out of politics.
Okay, I mean, like, I feel like the more important thing would be flipping Republican votes to Democrat and then fighting from there, rather than trying to flip Dem to blue or Dem. But I think we disagree on that. We could go back and forth on that probably forever.
And by the way,
but,
Stephen, I'll just say real quick, that's why I formed Just Democrats, so that we could have hope, so that we could have uncorrupted Democrats. And that's why I formed Wolfpack at wolf-pack.com. Wolfpack is to get money out of politics. It's now, you want to talk about bipartisan, it is massively bipartisan. Republican voters hate corruption, Democratic voters hate corruption. The politicians love it, the voters hate it. So we brought people together, and now we're fighting for it. And it's passed in like 3 Republican legislatures, it's passed in 20 overall in the states, and it's a resolution to call for a convention to get money out of politics, because the only way you can do it is go above the Supreme Court and get an amendment.
Sure.
And so it's a beautiful movement, and you couldn't do it, but you've got to get past the corrupt politicians.
Sure.
First.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just, like, it's not like having a lot of progressives in Congress have helped at all, right? Like, the seats that are more important are going to be the ones in the middle anyway, right? Our mansions and our cinemas. Because the reason why those seats are important is because we know that those are the only types of Democrats that can hold those seats, right? If AOC starts saying, well, I'm not voting with the party, anything, screw you guys, I want a more progressive agenda, okay, fine. Eventually she'll get primaried by somebody else, but that's always going to be a Democratic seat. That's always going to be a safe seat. We're not worried about losing it. I think that's why we fight for those seats in the middle so much more. On the Republican side as well, I think that's why those seats in the middle are so much more valuable, why people fight over them so much more. And I feel like that's why we should be trying to expand our majorities rather than purity testing the seats that are the furthest to the left that aren't as valuable anyway.
So, Stephen, in my opinion, there's a fundamental misperception in there in the first place, because Joe Manchin is not the only kind of guy who could win in West Virginia. West Virginia is very populist. They're more populist than they are conservative, right? The reason Manchin wins is because mainstream media gives him tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in free positive coverage. They call him moderate, right? But if you look at his policy positions, literally none of them are moderate. He takes extreme right-wing positions where the country's not. For example, 3/4 of the country wants to raise taxes on the rich. Joe Manchin comes on TV and goes, I'm a moderate, I want to cut taxes on the rich, I'm reasonable, right? That's not the moderate position. That's a tiny extremist minority of the country. And what does corporate media do? Moderate. No, you go in and you run populist, and you say to people, goddamn right, we're going to tax the rich. We're going to finally get justice. You're paying your taxes every day. The middle class gets screwed day in and day out. It's time that the rich pay their fair taxes. It's time that you get to spend time with your baby when you deliver. I mean, I can go on and on. You go populist, and you could win so many more of those seats rather than the fake moderates that are just corporate.
But I mean, the reality is Manchin voted with Biden's agenda 88% of the time, right? Like, he didn't vote for
what, on post offices?
It's better than having a Republican in there. I mean, how many of the Republicans are voting on Biden's agenda 88% of the time, right? That's what I'm saying. If another Democrat can win in West Virginia, then go for it. My understanding is the last.
Actually, what's Susan Collins' record when it comes to voting with Biden? It would most certainly be lower than 88%, but that's like the closest Republican I can imagine, the most quote unquote moderate Republican I can think of in a similar position to Joe.
Time somebody tried to primary Manchin, the guy got like 30% of the vote, I think. I don't even remember the name.
It's actually, I think it was worse than that. So it was Paula Jean Swearengin, and she's a good person, but not the greatest candidate.
Sure.
Nah, she got destroyed. She got bodied. I mean, bodied hard.
You know, and so look, do you need someone who's a quality candidate? Yes. But honestly, the hardest thing in the world is to get past the mainstream media, because they'll just smear you to death. And so they do it to all the progressives. And so, but but I would argue, and now we're going to get too far down this rabbit hole and we have very little time left, but I'll just say, I think Manchin in a lot of ways does more damage than a Republican, because he validates the Republican position.
Dude, weren't they going to debate Kyle Rittenhouse? Okay, they are still going to debate Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay, I thought they weren't going to do that. He just said we have a little bit of time left.
By saying, I agree with it, and hence it's bipartisan, hence it's moderate, hence it's the reasonable position. And so I think that does way more damage than just a regular Republican who just seems like an extremist. He makes their extremist positions look good, and that's a world of damage.
Like, do you think if Manchin wasn't in the Senate,
Okay, one second. Let me read something from the chat. Yeah, jackass. She lost because the candidate with the most money 90% of the times wins the race. Yeah, she got bodied. Okay. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news and reality to you. If you cannot fundraise, you're a shit candidate. If you can't make money to run your campaign, then you're a bad candidate. You can't just be Marianne Williamson, fucking run around off of vibes and fucking mood crystals and just hope that people will just kind of vibe with you if they see your TikTok that you post on your social media account and they'll come and support you. Okay, that's how Joshua Collins ran, and he lost to a fucking dead guy. He was in 9th place behind somebody who literally died on the campaign trail. So no, you cannot just win elections on vibes and all that. If you can't raise money to run a campaign, then you can't run a campaign unless you're going to make up for that deficit through something else. For example, being born a Kennedy, which she wasn't. So she had to make up for it somewhere else. If she wasn't going to fundraise, she couldn't. She got bodied.
Do you think that we would have Jackson?
Susan Collins is near 70%. Okay, so that's an 18% difference. Shroom vibes can win elections, Dylan. Okay, well, maybe one day. Maybe if this country becomes enlightened enough, but so far, it ain't the case.
Do you think if like if Manchin wasn't in the Senate, do you think that we would have Jackson as a Supreme Court?
So,
Like, do you think that that would? Like,
One second. Let me read something. Fundraise from who, jackass? If your donors fund your campaign, you will be indebted to them who fund Joe Manchin, dipshit. That's why money in politics is the main problem. Okay, retard. Let me just tell you just quickly. My point isn't that money in politics is good, is that money in politics is reality. And so you're going to need to raise money to win in politics. And if we were playing in fairyland, we were going into the woods and, you know, playing with the elves and the fucking, you know, the giants and the luscious field, and we're fucking casting spells riding on unicorns, then maybe we would live in a world where you sit one person next to another person and they just simply say, here's my position and here's my position. And people say, okay, that's our position. I go with you. But that's not the world we live in. We live in the United States of a fucking America. Corporations dominate. It's capitalism, baby. And if that's the country we live in, if that's the political structure we live in, and we don't want to literally overthrow the government and start a fucking civil war, then we got to evolve that system forward, away from corporate power. But the only way we're going to do that is in part winning in elections under the current system. That's the only way you change the system. That's the only way. Either changing the system through elections, direct action, or revolution. These are your three options. Now, I don't know what type of direct action Paula Jean Swearengin could have done in the lead up to change her odds, but she ran, she lost, she wasn't a good candidate. It isn't just corporate money. It could also be, and I know this is a hard thing to believe, but maybe in West Virginia, one of the most pro-Trump states in the union, that is heavily reliant both culturally, which is underestimated, and financially on the coal industry, even if it's a bad sell, even if it's not sustainable, even if they have to evolve out of it. Paula Jean Swearengin was not the candidate for them, either financially because she couldn't raise the money, or because they just didn't agree with her. Is it at all possible that it could have also just been that she wasn't that popular? She just wasn't a good candidate? Is that possible? How many times does a candidate have to lose until we say, actually, you suck at this? There's a question that has to be asked. Or are we just going to run it like Shahid Buttar does and run again and again and again and again and again, basically making it your career to be a permanent loser? Look, I hate corporate financing and politics. I despise it. I don't like the control of financial institutions, the big finance that they have over our election. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But we can't just throw our arms up every time we lose and say, well, you know, it was because of the corruption, or, oh, well, you know, it was because of the corporate media. Oh, well, you know, whoever said that changing the country would be easy? Whoever said that the system was going to bow to us and heed our beck and call when trying to make changes? It didn't happen any other time. big institutional changes were necessary, that the whole world just bowed to the will of those who knew that we needed to change things if we were to evolve as a society. That's how, you know, political revolutions, quote unquote, if we're going to go off the Bernie Sanders style, happens. That's how they happen. And look, I'm not trying to dig at you for being angry at corporate media. I'm digging at you for being purposefully obtuse when analyzing what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I disagree with Paul and Jean Swearengin on any number of policy issues. I'm not saying that I disagree with you about corporate finance and elections. What I'm saying is she lost. She was a bad candidate. She couldn't raise the money, and Manchin's still in the seat. That's all I'm saying. Now, if you want to just keep running losers over and over and over and over again for these seats, and I'm trying not to pick on Paula Jean. I'm trying not to pick on Paula Jean, but you're forcing me to kind of in a way here. I don't want to start, you know, the Hillary Clinton system where you just run again and again and just hope this time, you know, you get through. Like this just happened in Turkey too, where they ran the guy for like the 7th time, who's only known, at least outside of Turkey, for losing to Erdogan. It was supposed to be the closer election. Kishkaroglu, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name correctly. And what does he do? He loses. They would have performed better if they chose a different candidate. Anyway, whatever. Keep going. Have Data Buddy. Again, we have Data Buddy. Again, 90% of the time, the candidate that wins is the one with the most money. You need organizations that will find ways around money in politics. Something Cenk did. Something you blatantly say Paul got bodied for trying to beat a corporate whore. Can you see why that is absolutely fucking... No, dude, I can't even understand the fucking words you're saying, man. I can't understand the words you're saying. And honestly, I support Window Lickers Anonymous, so I'm going to leave you alone.
Because I understand the frustration, because I feel it too. Okay, I'm not a Manchin or a Sinema fan. I don't think Sinema's a Democrat anymore. Isn't she an independent now? I'm not fans of these senators. I agree, and it sucks that it feels like you know, like they have so much sway over the party. But I mean, like, this is how politics always works. If you go to countries, for instance, that have multi-party systems, oftentimes you'll get a majority government formed, and all of a sudden that little party with like 6 seats is calling the shots on the majority government because people need those votes. And I feel like Manchin and Sinema to be the same. But I mean, like, when we look at I don't even know how to pronounce her first name, for Jackson for the Supreme Court, when you look at the major legislation that was passed like almost along party lines in the Senate, Manchin sucks, but a Republican there is like game over. Like, now we can't even complain about how bad our legislation is because there's no legislation to even speak of. We would just have a lame duck president.
Yeah.
By the way, this is the whole reason why I liked Bernie. Bernie can raise the money. Bernie was able to create enough popularity and much of a movement that without the corporate financing, even though he had some unions backing him and some other groups like that, but without the large financial institutions backing him, he was still able to fundraise a shit ton of money and run a really, really good campaign, pushing good progressive policy issues, social democratic issues, right? Now, I'm going to prefer that performance over failure every single time. Every single time. I'm just going to. You will, under the current paradigm in the United States, have to find a way to fundraise your money. Unless we radically change how we do elections through snapping our fingers and make it so actually everybody gets the same campaign budget, or you need to be able to pull, if you pull at this amount, then you'll get a certain amount of money that you can use to, you know, run your campaign. Until that system comes about, you know, a different system, then we do have to operate within the system to some capacity in order to change it.
So, by the way, that's another one to give credit to Biden on. I think just...
That is correct. I wonder if Destiny supported Bernie. I don't know if he really supported anybody in the primary. I remember something in the back of my head says Elizabeth Warren. But I forget.
Jackson has been really good so far. She was the lone vote in a critical union case where even Sotomayor and Kagan voted the wrong way, and it was 8-1. And yeah, so Stephen, it's a balancing act. I don't want people to misinterpret my passion for being impractical. No, you got to get things done. And so if you're just doing it for rhetoric or to for release or something like that, that's not at all helpful. You have to, the outrage should bring a spotlight with it, and then you shine that spotlight on the issue where you have winning ground. That's why I talk about paid family leave being at 84%. It's winning ground for us. If we wanted to fight on that, we can win on that.
I agree with Cenk on that. It's part of the reason why I not only should we be pushing paid family leave, but the same reason why I talk about marijuana legalization all the time. It's now a winning issue. Not only is it a winning issue when you poll the majority of Americans, but now the majority of U.S. states have legalized marijuana. My state, home state of Maryland, pot was like, it's now formally legal as of like a week or two ago, right? So when I go back there, I can smoke up as much as I want, right? Contribute to my great state through taxes while getting blazed. This is an issue I think Joe Biden should pick up running in the 2024 election. And I would like to see the Republicans try to run against marijuana legalization. I remember Doc Hollywood, Dr. Oz, running against John Fetterman in part by like making a campaign ad where a bong comes out of his big head, right? Like, oh, look at this pothead. Oh my goodness. And he won. He did well. John Fetterman not only beat him, he beat him by a decent enough margin after having a stroke on the campaign trail. I think it's a winning issue. I'm not saying that that's the main reason John Fetterman won, but I'm saying that, yeah, I agree with Cenk that a lot of these issues we should be running on harder. Because there's a list of issues that we can just pull right now, see the majority of Americans run on, and I think like support and just run on it hard. I don't think I'm saying anything revolutionary here. I don't think anyone is really saying anything revolutionary here by saying run on the things that are popular with working class Americans. And here's also the difficult part is in 2016, when it comes to, you know, paid family leave, both Trump and Hillary said they supported it. Trump gets in, could have passed it, could have worked with Democrats to pass it. I'm sure he could have gotten enough Republicans to sign on if he strong-armed them enough. I'm sure he could have, you know, corralled a few. Hell, at some point, you know, during 2018, the Democrats had the majority in the House. But he didn't care. He lied about it. He lied about his position because he didn't support paid family leave.
Right? But if you say, hey, listen, we need to get a Supreme Court justice passed, so I need to make X, Y, and Z compromise with Manchin or Sinema. Well, look, in that case, I could live with it. It depends. It depends on what are we compromising on? What's the policy? What's the position? What are we going for? So it's not just a blanket statement of, okay, get rid of them or don't get rid of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh man, we got two other huge topics here. We can do this for a couple minutes. I'm curious. Has your this was like a major litmus test, I think, for a lot of like media coverage was like the Rittenhouse stuff. Do you still stand by? Do you feel like, I feel like when I watched the Young Turks and a lot of other people, there were a lot of insane statements coming out about how like conservatives love to kill people. Conservatives are always looking to kill people. They can't wait to kill. They're constantly looking to kill people, get away from it. Like, do you think that like this type of rhetoric or this discussion around what were like largely violent riots that were largely spurred, I think, by like bad media coverage of the original Kenosha shooting of oh God, what was the name of the guy? They got shot in the back 7 times. Yeah. It like the whole Rittenhouse saga to me was Jacob Blake gets shot and there's bad coverage in the media about it, making it seem like he was just an innocent guy getting in the car to drive away. And then riots happen in Kenosha that get bad media coverage. You've got the CNN, the infamous CNN coverage of, you know, fiery protests, but mostly peaceful in the background. Then you've got Rittenhouse, you know, goes and does his thing, and then we get more bad coverage of that, in my opinion. I think a lot of the facts get misrepresented there in a lot of left-leaning media, and it just feels like we're on this never-ending train of stoking the fires of resentment, hatred, on top of misinformation and bad claims, and then at the end of the day, we all walk away feeling like we've done something good when we're just like kind of like preaching basically misinformation to the audience and everything.
Yeah. So, no, I don't back away from anything I said. But again, I'm not a standard leftist, right? So it's, and you're not either, right? Mm-hmm. You're not a standard anything, right? So for example, you support Democrat and what I would call the establishment Democrats, but you have this Rittenhouse opinion, which is a little out of left field, right? Or maybe right field. And so that's, and like I said in the beginning, respect you for that. That's genuine.
Dog, I need to like ignore like gutter chat. Like site chat's fine as always, but I'm looking at gutter chat. Let me look at the type of messages I'm reading in here. Let's read some of these messages. Satan is 100% real. Where do you think people go when they die? The spirit realm. Why is it so hard to believe? Oh, here's another one. The Democrat Party is Marxist. LGBTQ plus gender ideologies are designed to destroy families. It is all about power for the Marxist Democrat Party. Marxist. You know, I remember the Marxist policy of IRS funding. Remember the Marxist policy of military budget increases? You guys remember that? All those, you know, all those Marxist pipelines. All right, let's continue. Those fulfilling those Marxist drilling requests. Well, I believe it was Karl Marx who said, "Drill, baby, drill."
Unique, etc. Right? So on Rittenhouse, yeah, there's absolutely no reason to go with a weapon to that protest or riot. Like if you're right and it's a terrible riot, and in a lot of ways that it was. So so I wouldn't have put up the chyron saying peaceful protest as the fires are going on in the back. No, of course there was some fires, there was vandalism, there was danger. There's no question about that, right? You can't deny reality. Now, why would I grab a weapon and go in the middle of that? It doesn't make any sense. It's not even his community.
So the obvious, well, I mean, it was his community, but like the obvious comparison would be like the rooftop Koreans during like the Rodney King riots in LA. Like, do you think that does anybody in the United States have any sort of moral right to defend communities that feel attached to, or do you think that's just something
No, Stephen. So I think those are two very, very different things. Look, you got a store, you worked your ass off for it. My dad's an immigrant. He worked his ass off. He built his own business brick by brick. And you want to protect that. I hear you, brothers and sisters. Okay, I got you. And these days there's a lot of crime, and you want to protect your family. Absolutely, I get it. Okay, but he didn't live there. I mean, they crossed state lines. I don't know.
Just real quick, because I lived in Nebraska. He crossed. It was a 15-minute drive. He lived like 15 minutes away. And when you live in, I lived in Omaha. There's a lot of towns that you drive out to that you're like part of those communities. A lot of people in Council Bluffs go to.
Why?
Because
why go there?
Well, why? I mean, like. People don't talk about it, but like the day before the Rittenhouse thing happened, there was that older guy, Robert Cobb. His business had literally been burned to the ground. It was being arsoned, and I think he was running around with a fire extinguisher trying to put it out. And people.
And what was Rittenhouse going to do? Was he going to sit there and shoot everybody that came by? I mean,
he shot 3 people. I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah, but that's my point. He went there to go shoot. In my opinion, he went there not specifically like in my mind, premeditated. I'm going to go and murder some people on the left, and I'm going to feel great. No,
sure, but
right?
like, but
I'm
then when you look
with
at
a weapon, and if there's any kind of provocation, woohoo, I might get to use it.
Yeah, but I mean, we can say that, but when you look at the evidence, there's just no evidence. There's nothing that supports that.
No, that's 100%. Look, he goes there with a weapon.
The only thing I vaguely remember from the trial that gave me that idea is that I remember days before the shooting happened, he was at some store or something, and I remember him saying, "Oh, I wish somebody would loot around here, like fire him up," or something along those. Oh my God, somebody remember exactly what I'm thinking of. That's the only thing I can vaguely remember, and it's certainly not enough to push charges on anybody in a case. Monthonis, thank you so much for the primer being sub for 6 months. Yeah, I don't know what the year stands for, but I appreciate the primer. Thank you.
He goes to provoke. Then why did he shoot the first guy?
He shot the first guy because the first guy was chasing him in a parking lot. He'd already made threats earlier. That's on camera, and he was lunging for Rittenhouse's rifle after a guy behind him had fired a shot with his pistol. After Rittenhouse turned around to see where the noise was coming from.
So, but Stephen, I think that you're proving my point, which is
I don't think so at all. I think it was. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me explain. Let me explain. So you go into this what you think is a dangerous situation. You go in there with a weapon. Then you hear a shot. That's true. There was a shot. He heard it. He didn't see where the shot was coming from. He just turned around and shot the guy.
He turned around and shot a guy that was lunging.
Reckless.
No, it wasn't
reckless.
It wasn't reckless at all because he only shot.
Why is he arguing, dude? I don't know why Cenk is arguing this point. The dude lunged for his gun. You can see it on camera. The dude was chasing him in a dark alleyway, lunging for his firearm. It's like that, like that's classic self-defense. There's not really much you can argue here.
Shot the guy that was lunging for him, trying to grab his rifle. This is indisputable on video. The guy was chasing him down. He turned around. He was lunging.
Can I come to your house? Can I come to your house with a weapon, and then if you grab for it, I get to shoot you?
Yeah. In some scenarios, yeah, I would believe so. If I had made a threat to you, Cenk, if I went to Cenk and said, Cenk, I'm gonna bash your I'm gonna kill you, Cenk, or something like that, right? And then later, I chase you through your own home before lunging for your gun. Yeah, I don't think anybody would be that particularly miffed if I got shot.
If probably
also it's in his home. We're not even talking about another, like, out in public, but still, even in the home, yeah.
Yeah, if you were in my house,
crazy.
No,
You
hold
don't
on,
see
wait.
that that's crazy?
If you come to my
I'm
house,
sorry. This okay? Is Cenk okay? Oh my God, no! I'm sorry. This feels like he's twisting himself in knots not to agree with Destiny. Is his take legitimately that if somebody lunges for your gun while you're in somebody's home, like you can go into somebody's house, lunge for their gun after chasing them around the house, and not expect to get shot? Or that would be wrong for somebody to defend themselves in that way. I couldn't craft like a more clear-cut self-defense case than somebody came into my home, chased me around my house before lunging for my firearm.
and you have a weapon on you, and we get into an altercation, I'm gonna grab that gun from you? Of course you have a right to defend yourself, especially if I was twice your size.
My house with a weapon in the first place. What am I doing there?
Hold on. You shouldn't be in my house with a weapon because I'm on private property. The city of Kenosha was not private property. Rittenhouse had just as much a right to be there as any other protester did.
So listen, I'll give you an analogy. January 6th. I'm very upset about it. I don't like what happened there at all. I think they were trying to
Look, if the argument is Rittenhouse was a dumb kid who shouldn't have been there, shouldn't have been isolated from the crowd, all these things are true. Rittenhouse probably shouldn't have been there. Rittenhouse probably, and we're talking about morally, not legally. Legally, you can do whatever the fuck you want. Morally, he shouldn't have been there when it comes to him not knowing what to do because he separated himself from the crowd. He shouldn't have separated himself from the crowd. He behaved somewhat irresponsibly while he was there. But when it comes to like whether it was self-defense or not, like if somebody lunges for your gun, what else are you supposed to do? Oh, let me just wrestle him and maybe if he takes my gun, I die. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think anybody would apply this similar standard to anyone else. Montheus, thank you so much for the, is that a primer? I can't see because my assets are covering it. Whatever it was, I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
minor democracy. If I went in there with an AR-15 or any kind of weapon and I looked for a threat, I'd definitely find one, and then I'd get to kill everybody that I thought was a threat. I mean, that guy you say is lunging for his weapon. From what I saw, that guy's trouble. I get it. He was troubled, I should say. The first guy who got killed, right? And so he goes, maybe he went looking for trouble too. I don't know, right? But he threw a plastic.
The dude was making threats the night of to the. I mean, I don't know, man. I think the footage is pretty clear, man. You don't usually chase people around and lunge for firearms. You're not looking for trouble in some sense.
Bag that had plastic bottles in it.
Wait. The plastic bag Rittenhouse didn't even see the plastic bag. The issue was no, but the issue is Rittenhouse was running away. This guy was chasing.
I felt like Cenk kind of like held his ground in the last conversation a lot more. Now it feels like I don't know. It feels like he's waiting in like uncharted territory. Like I don't. Dude, this is such a weak defense from Cenk.
Him, and when Rittenhouse turned around with an assault rifle, the guy went to grab the rifle from him. That's a pretty clear cut. Like,
Steven, if we follow, and then he got hit with then he shoots and kills someone. Then he's running through the crowd. He's made the situation 10,000 times more.
He's not making this. He's running away from he's running to the cops to turn himself in, which is exactly what he should be.
The crowd is everywhere. The crowd is everywhere. He's running.
That's the one thing. Like, this is one of the bigger things. He shouldn't have been isolated from the crowd. But whether or not it was smart of him to be isolated from his group, isolated in this crowd where something like this could happen, that doesn't remove the responsibility of people not to lunge for his gun. I don't think there's any country in the world where I could say, yes, this guy lunged for his gun, but, and everybody's going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Through the crowd, and then somebody sees that he shot someone, and they go after him with a skateboard, which I wouldn't have done, right? But now he shoots and kills the guy with a skateboard.
Yeah, because the guy's trying to assault him with a skateboard. If he had a bat, we'd say the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, look, couple of things. Everybody's different. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. Some people will be scared, and if you get hit with a skateboard, you think, all right, I'm going to murder that guy. For me, I get hit with a skateboard, I don't shoot the other guy.
I'm sorry, I don't believe him. I don't believe Cenk Uygur. I do not believe that if Cenk Uygur was on the ground and somebody was actively trying to bash his head in with a skateboard and he had a gun, that he would not use it to defend himself if he knew how to do it. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I feel like most human beings have too much of a self-preservation instinct to avoid doing that in that scenario. Was it Cenk who spit on Alex? No, it was Jimmy Dore who spit on Alex Jones. Never mind.
If somebody hits you with a skateboard in the face, there's like a 20% chance that you die. A skateboard?
Okay,
Skateboards
I'll
are a big
take the
thing.
chance.
Okay, that's great that you would, but I wouldn't compel a 17-year-old to take that chance in the middle of the month. Especially what
the fuck argument is a skateboard? Just say it over and over again. Okay, here's my chest to Cenk Uygur. I will give him $5,000 if he allows me to hit him in the face with a skateboard 5 times. If he allows me to hit him, I'll give him $10,000. No, actually, I think we could probably crowdfund this and make it like $50,000, something like that. And I'm talking like on the end with the wheels, man. I'm talking, nobody would be able to deal with that. That you think you can die from that, from blunt force trauma. You know what this sounds like? This sounds like waterboarding's torture. Yeah, what? A rag and some water is gonna, yeah, sure, that's torture. Okay, sure, buddy. That's what it kind of sounds like, unironically.
Well, the people that beat that one dude within an inch of his life, Robert Cobb, the day before, that everybody that went to this protest, they'd all seen videos of that. That's why people went to the riots the second day. That guy got beat to an inch of his life with bare fists.
Steven, if you say, hey, listen, I see an altercation on the...
This is actually a great point from Destiny. Okay, could you imagine like going to some domestic violence victim and be like, oh, what, a fist? Oh, a hand hurt you? A hand made of frail bones, skin, and blood, and a little bit of mud? Oh, really? Come on, not even like a knife? Get out of here! Like this is ridiculous. I'm sorry. This is a silly point.
Subway, the bus, the street, and I'm gonna go protect not even a family member, but a random woman walking by, working class person, and they're getting picked on, and I happen to see it, and you jump in. I got you, okay? And I actually appreciate you, right? But you make an active decision to drive into what you think is a riot and a dangerous situation with a weapon, and then you get freaked out by the plastic bag and a shot you didn't see and a skateboard, and you kill 2 people. That's on you, brother. You never should have gone there in the first place. You were looking for trouble, and then you found it, and then you cry like you're a victim? Oh, hell no. Steven, the problem here, sorry, one more thing.
Go for it.
The problem here is that if we follow your way of thinking about it, and you tell me otherwise, of course, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think if we follow that way of thinking, then everybody's going to grab a weapon, they're all going to be in the streets, and the minute anybody looks kind of funny at you or throws a bag or you hear something that's loud, or there's a guy with a skateboard, boom, 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 we're shooting each other to no end. That's why stand your ground is a disaster. And wherever they pass stand your ground laws, you have more homicides every time.
So if you have videos coming out of people who are losing their businesses, who are getting beaten by people on the street, who are rioting in a city, the next day people are going to show up to defend that town. Like, we live in the United States, whether we like guns or we don't, that's the reality of it. Rittenhouse had more of a right to be there than any of the rioters that were there after dark, that were setting things on fire, that were causing... He had just as much as right to be there, if not more than any other person. And in the United States, you are allowed to carry a weapon on you as well. The idea that he was shooting Rosenbaum because he threw a bag at him, that's just not true. We can watch the videos a million times. Rosenbaum was already getting violent before in the night. There is no video of Rittenhouse provoking anybody ever. There is video of Rosenbaum talking to people, using the N-word, saying, I'm gonna fuck somebody up. He was the one that was chasing Rittenhouse for like 20 meters through a car park before Rittenhouse finally turned and shot him. And then the other guy was charging with a skateboard to hit him. Grossgord's charging with a pistol to shoot and kill him, and he got shot. His arm got shot. I don't see the wild chain of events where it's like, oh my God, since Rittenhouse was allowed to shoot a guy that was charging him for 20 meters and trying to grab his rifle, and then he shot another guy that went to attack him with a skateboard. Like, yeah, I mean, in the United States, with a guy with an AR-15, that's about what I would expect to happen. And I mean, we're a year or two later. It's not like there's been a deluge of shootings of innocent skaters now by young boys with AR-15. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like the landscape changed very much.
No. So, Stephen, look, there's a couple of things here. So, number one, the jury gets to decide whatever they decide.
By the way, like, don't equate anything I'm saying to like, oh, I believe Kyle Rittenhouse should have been there, or oh, I believe what Kyle Rittenhouse did was smart, or like I already expressed like my disapproval of him and the way he behaved during that night. That doesn't change the fundamental principle of self-defense. That also doesn't change the facts of the case. It also doesn't change the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse since then has decided to become like I don't know, to create his own like tour company, going from like conservative talk show to conservative talk show to talk up his new turkey shoot phone game. It is hard for me to believe, right, that he's crying and he's so upset about, you know, the shooting, and I can easily believe somebody kills somebody and they're upset about it. But now like the turkey shoot app game and like everything in relation to it is just unbelievably untasteful, and he should be going off into like some other career, figuring out some other thing to isolate himself from this and try to forget this ever happened. But instead, just like what's happening with the QAnon shaman, he's becoming like a martyr.
And so if they decided, hey, you know what, that was enough of a self,
even if, you know, he's not dead like traditional martyr, but still you get the idea.
Defense, okay, that's what the jury decided. So I'm telling you my perspective on it. And I get that you might technically get away with it if it's a skateboard and you felt, oh my God, the skateboard's a little dangerous, and the guy lunging at me, you know how many guys have lunged at me in my life? If I had to kill all.
Dude, that's not just that he lunged at you, is he lunged at the gun, man. If somebody lunged at a police officer's gun and that guy got shot, 99.9% of people would say, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't have lunged to try to grab that police officer's gun. That's obviously his mistake. He shouldn't have done that. Like, obviously. Are we going to really say that if somebody lunges for a police officer's gun, that police officers shouldn't be able to defend themselves using lethal force if somebody's trying to engage in a death struggle for their pistol?
All of them, I'd have killed like 20, 40 guys. Okay. So there's the, hey, should he be guilty? That's up to the jury. There's, should he have done that? And I think that's crazy that he went there. He definitely should not have done that. And then, so I'm going to ask you, so do you think that 10 guys, 100 guys?
What did the cop do? The cop could have literally called you a cuck. If you go for that cop's gun like that, you shouldn't have done it. You should not have attempted to grab the gun to kill the officer or do whatever you were going. You shouldn't have done that. That's stupid. You shouldn't have done it.
Guys, I don't know.
And it's not like you can be like, oh, Kyle, like I disagree with why I was protesting there, all this. It's not like Kyle was going on some random shooting spree and he needed to be tackled to save everybody. That wasn't happening. The guy decided to chase him, to try to lunge for his gun. He got shot. After he got shot and killed, then another person goes up to Kyle after he's continuing to run away. Then he gets beaten with the skateboard. That guy gets shot and killed. Third guy points a gun at him. His arm gets shot out. I think I'm trying to remember I'm trying to remember if the gun was pointed at him or was pointed near him or was pointed at the gun. Kyle Rittenhouse pistol photo. Trying to see if I can get the photo of the guy with the pistol. That's afterwards, but I want like when he pointed. I don't know if I want to go through all these pictures. I think a lot of this is TOS, so I should probably leave it be.
200 guys with weapons should have gone to January 6th, left-wingers, and said, all right, we're here to protect the peace. I mean, this isn't just our community. This is our nation. And it looks like you guys are here to do a coup. We're here. Okay. There's 85 of us with AR-15s. What do you think would have happened?
I mean, I don't know how many people there had weapons. It's based on the, what was the name of the crazy Proud Boys or whatever? It sounds like there might have been more guns than that already on the premises.
No, but there was only guns on one side. If there was guns on both sides, what do you think would have happened on January 6th?
I mean, there were police officers there with firearms that showed up, right? It's not like there was a mass shootout.
The police officers let right-wingers do anything they want. They let them
No,
walk in.
they absolutely
If those guys were black, they would have gotten slaughtered. If those guys were Muslims, it would have been
if
the biggest massacre in
that's true,
American
then we
history.
would have seen thousands or tens of thousands of black people killed during the BLM riots, but that didn't happen, right? I don't think black.
Wait, did they bum rush the Capitol? Did they threaten to murder Mike Pence? And
No,
Nancy
but they
Pelosi?
burned down police stations, cars, state houses. We saw
And
it
they
in
got
Kenosha.
shot for it. A lot of
Not
them
that
got
many.
shot.
There were millions of people
Not enough?
protesting. For your statement that police officers are looking to
I'm trying to remember. I remember hearing, and I don't know if this is just liberal, me being a liberal soy boy, but I remember somewhere hearing that the protests coming from the murder of George Floyd were some of the largest scale, if not the largest scale protest movement in American history. Is that true? I remember hearing that. I remember reading that headline, but I would have to Google it.
indiscriminately kill black people? No,
I did
absolutely.
not say that.
Well,
I did not say that.
In one of your
It
videos,
wouldn't be indiscriminate.
Well, hold on. In
It
one of your
wouldn't be
videos, you said
indiscriminate.
if you walked up to a car with a rifle as a black person, you would get immediately killed. And you're making it sound like if black people would have shown up for January 6th, they would have gotten killed. I mean, there was
they
a
would've
lot
gotten
of.
killed, yes.
Also, yeah, it's saying that a 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse at that age shouldn't have been at that environment either. Other very valid point. Or that a 17-year-old should not have been carrying a gun in that environment either. Also extremely very valid point. But again, when we're talking about the legality of it, which seems to be what's being debated here, like legally it's self-defense. And if we were to change it and say this wasn't self-defense, I don't know how actually that could affect precedent. About the idea that somebody could be chased down and have their gun lunged for, but that doesn't count as self-defense because they were at a protest. What would be the change in precedent to make it that we find Rittenhouse guilty?
There was a lot of rioting for the BLM stuff. It's not like that many people got killed by the cops. So I think that the idea that cops are just looking to kill black people or black people are going to get killed for rioting more than white people,
no.
I think we would have saw a lot more death during the BLM riots if that was the case.
Yeah, let's not put words in each other's mouths, me included, right? So I hear you, but I'm not saying indiscriminately. I'm not saying cops are looking to kill black people. I'm just saying if thousands of black people or Muslim people were bum rushing cops who were trying to protect powerful people like our Congress people, tons of them would have gotten shot. And we could disagree on that. That's okay. You think, no, the cops would have just let them walk in like they did with the white right-wingers? Maybe, but I doubt it. Okay, but you didn't answer the core question.
Mm-hmm.
If a whole bunch of left-wingers had gone there with weapons, do you think that would have been a good idea?
No, I generally, from all the data I've seen, the more guns in an area, usually the more fucked up shit is going to be always. Like,
okay, great.
That's just statistically. But that's up against our Second Amendment rights as Americans, right? I would almost always compel people to, but I mean, I'm also wealthy. I would compel people to leave your property if you want. When I was poor in college, I probably would have killed somebody if they tried to steal my shit, if I had the opportunity to see it, because that's your lifetime's worth of shit that you put into buying stuff that you have. So, you know, like if black people had the ability to defend themselves during the Tulsa race riots, during the Black Wall Street being burned down, for the Koreans that defended their communities, for the Black Panthers in California that felt the need to defend their communities with rifles. I mean, if minority communities or if any community wants to take up arms and defend their community in the United States, you have the right to do that. And if I was going to come down on any side in a conflict there where people start getting killed, I would always come down on the rioters first. For Kenosha, the people that were primarily at fault were the people that were there after dark that were setting shit on fire. Those are the people who have the primary responsibility for everything that happened. As much as we talk about showing up to a riot with a gun and how irresponsible it is,
I will also say that one of the best ways to address the problems that rioting causes is to address the injustices and economic imbalances that cause rioting to happen in the first place.
Escorts, the guy that got his bicep shut off, he showed up with a gun. He almost used it on Rittenhouse, right? So I mean, yeah.
Well, by the way, two things about that. Number one, he didn't. So apparently you could show restraint, even though he got shot. And number two, he shouldn't have shown up with a gun either. Here, look, my last thing on this is, I'll give you the most extreme example. So you remember Charlottesville, of course, the Nazis chant, the Jews will not replace us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would anybody begrudge 10, 20 Jewish guys going in there with weapons and going, no, you're not going to chant this stuff in our community. Well, I mean, that's like the guys that you could least begrudge. I mean, these guys are literal goddamn Nazis, and they're chanting against the Jews while carrying torches, right? But if those 10 or 20 Jewish guys asked me, I'd say, I love you, brothers and sisters, and I love your strength, and I love your attitude, but don't go. Because it's guaranteed that people are going to die if you go, okay? So, and some of them might be you, some of them might be the other guys, but I don't want anyone to die. But to your point of like, oh, me saying, oh, Republicans want violence from time to time. Oh, that's crazy. No, they're just like us. No, there's polling. 28% of Republicans say that it's time for violence. So that's a giant number. And
it is, but I mean, for Charlottesville,
number.
as hateful as that riot was, they weren't destroying the city. I think that's a key component that, like, not to mention, and for Kenosha, that city was being destroyed off of misinformation reported about the Jacob Blake shooting. And there were videos of, like, people getting attacked, of car dealerships being set on fire. It just seems like there's remarkably little empathy for the people whose community, if you go to Kenosha today, if you go downtown, there's still shit that's boarded up that has never opened again as a result of those riots. And people are just fixated on the people that were, I mean, as shitty as it is, defending their community against who they perceived as outsiders that were coming just to destroy it. But
yeah, so look, I keep saying last thing because we're so out of time.
Sure. Yeah, sorry,
okay,
go for it.
One more last thing. So to that point, Stephen, so some people say, hey, riots are the voice of the unheard. And I hear that, and that's a fair point. But by the way, you could maybe make that argument about January 6th, too. And so that's a different, very long conversation, okay? But that, to me, does not excuse going and setting a building on fire. No excuse. So I'm not excusing that 1%. Now, but if you think it was just because of like bad reporting on one case, I don't think you even think that, right? You know the context is...
Well, the Kenosha riots happen because of the Jacob Blake misreporting. What A to B, a direct line.
So you know the context of tons and tons of unarmed black guys being shot by cops in this country.
No, there are not tons and tons of unarmed black guys being shot by cops in this country.
All right, okay, so you don't agree with that. Okay, fine.
Well, how many do you think a year get shot? How many unarmed black guys are getting shot by cops?
Okay, Stephen. Okay, let me finish the point.
Okay.
We'll wrap up.
The number's like 12, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So if you look, I think that if you say to all black people in this country, you're all telling us you've been abused by cops, whether it's to the extreme of being shot or pulled over or arrested or something smaller. You've been abused, all of you, tens of millions of you say that, and you've been saying it for 100 years straight, and then we turn around and go, we don't believe you. I think that's deeply offensive. I think it doesn't make sense. I think it's ridiculous. So that's the context in which that riot happens. It doesn't excuse the riot. And by the way, the misreporting, yeah, okay, it turns out he had a knife, but they did shoot him in the back 7 times.
Because he was about to drive off with abducted children. That's a really important part.
He's not a good guy. He's not a good guy.
He's the worst guy. Yeah, but I'm saying that, like,
but
he was about to...
doesn't mean you shoot him in the back. There's other solutions other than...
They already tased him twice.
Shoot a guy in the back.
They didn't just show up. They were wrestling with outside the house. They tried to wrestle on the ground multiple times. They tased the guy twice.
Rittenhouse were showing up. Okay, so look... I think that this whole thing, the Second Amendment, I got a right to bring weapons. Everybody's going to bring weapons, and we're all going to kill each other. I think it's a disastrous idea. And anyone who, right-wing or left-wing, and by the way, Stephen, we've fought back against any kind of violence, including from our side. Even things like that Riley Gaines, I think, the swimmer, she goes and gives a speech at some college, and then the leftists surround the room that she's in and won't let her out, and she's afraid for her safety. Cops won't let her out because they're afraid for her safety. What are you guys doing? To be a progressive is to believe in nonviolence.
Sure.
We don't do those thug tactics, okay?
Sure, but I will say your guys' coverage of the Michael Reinhold guy was a lot different, and I think that was a shooting that was clearly in the wrong. He was stalking a dude for hours, chased him across the street, and shot him in the face, and then ran away, and they gave interviews to Vice, and you guys were comparing that to like, oh, well, if Rittenhouse could kill the one guy that was chasing him, this guy's killing should have been just as supported. I don't know. Like, when you build up this world of like alternative fact reporting over and over and over and over and over again, like it's not surprising to me that after a while you've got people on the right and left that just live in totally different worlds. So people on the left are like, of course we're going to go riot and burn down cities. Hundreds or thousands of people every year are getting indiscriminately killed by the cops, and then people on the right.
So by the way, I don't like the... Obviously, when I think Cenk exaggerated when he said tons and tons and tons of unarmed black people are getting shot. Statistically speaking, the number of unarmed black people getting shot every year is small. But overall, when we talk about how the police interact with the black community, the over-policing of the black community, a militarization of not only the black community but all communities, the way police have qualified immunity and it has stopped them from being held accountable, a lack of police review boards, a lot of police departments still not having body cameras. There's a lot of issues with the police department, not to mention of the fact, what is it called? Oh my God. When the cop can just take your shit, can somebody in chat will know what I'm talking about. Somebody will know what I'm talking about. Somebody say it in chat for me quick. Civil asset forfeiture. The practices of the modern American police department need a complete and utter overhaul if it can be saved in its current state whatsoever, right? I think that should be expressed in this conversation. I do want to make sure I bring that out, because I don't want it to just seem like, oh, you know, randomly, for no reason whatsoever, just because they've been lied to, all of these people went out and just started rioting because of this one lie. I do think that if someone spread misinformation about police interaction, obviously that's bad. Obviously that should be stopped. There's a reason why I wait so long after police shootings to even comment on them, because I want to make sure that I have all the information available, because I hate the spreading of disinformation. But I want to make sure that we do not paint a picture where it's like, oh yeah, there's no problem whatsoever. Even if misinformation did contribute to it, if there wasn't this pre-existing issue, I doubt the violence would have became what it was.
Right, or like, I don't know why you guys are burning down anything. We lived in a totally different fact world where all of your stuff is misreported, where people like, and then like even like, you know, like the Rittenhouse killings are being compared to like Breonna Taylor, which is actually a truly tragic case where a woman died for no reasons, where at best the cops were serving a not great warrant, and at worst they should.
Surreal 7, well, 1 second, let me read your name. Surreal 765, thank you so much for the primer, I appreciate it. Getting some generous donors and gutter chat today. Like we got that. I think we got a tier 2 in site chat earlier today. Gutter chat's been pulling it through. Okay, how much longer is this conversation? Because I wanna wrap up. Okay, not too much longer. Okay, dope.
Breonna Taylor, which is actually a truly tragic case where a woman died for no reasons, where at best the cops were serving a not great warrant, and at worst they shouldn't have even been there. And you've got people comparing like Breonna Taylor and Philando Castile, the black guy who got shot and killed in his car because the cops smelled weed, are comparing this to like the Rittenhouse killings and stuff. And it's like,
the fact that the NRA did not make a gigantic mess about the Philando Castile case. A legal gun owner informs the police officer that he has a gun in advance, does what he's supposed to do, still gets his ass executed in the car for nothing. And the NRA, the supposed National Rifle Association out there to guard the gun owners of America, they release like a single press release and then they're done. They don't care anymore. It's just not their demographic. It's not where their donors came from. So they don't give a fuck.
Like, geez, when all of it gets thrown together, it feels like it's easy to take none of it seriously. And that's the kind of thing that's frustrating to me.
All right, I hear you, but I again, we don't agree. And I think that this fetish of guns drives way more violence. It's an empirical fact. The more guns we have, the more homicides there are, the more suicides there are, the more tension we have in the country, the more we distrust each other, the more fearful we are, and the more we strike out against one another and shoot and kill. And what we're trying to do on the Young Turks is to end all that stuff. You know, the right wing, they'll never listen. But for the left wing, we try super hard to make sure that there are no riots, there's no violence, there's no threats. That's not what Martin Luther King stood for, or Nelson Mandela, or Mahatma Gandhi, and we remind our audience of that day in and day out. We probably do it more than any other show.
Okay. There's anything here we go back and forth for hours for, but I'll respect your time. We're already 20 minutes over, so do you have any final closing words or thoughts, remarks, or anything? Or
just look, guys, get in the fight, and by that I mean not like debates and not on the street, but I mean do something. If you're frustrated,
Yeah, join the International Legion. Go fight in the trenches. Cenk Uygur, he's going to lead the International Legion forward. He's going to take Moscow. Hell yeah. Good job, Cenk.
It's just the thing that Steven and I agree on, right? If you're
Moscow.
frustrated about the lack of progress,
Moscow.
then support a candidate.
Oh, okay.
Support
Sorry.
a group.
Different
Look,
mindsets.
I'm lucky I get to form groups, right? Because we've built up some degree of power leverage, et cetera, at TYT, right? But help Justice Democrats bring more uncorrupted progressives in the Congress to fight for you. Help Rebellion PAC get progressives elected that are going to be aggressive and make sure that they get paid family leave passed, etc. Help Wolfpack to get corruption out of politics. Or you form your own organization, and if you love Biden, then support Biden. If you, whoever it is, but get in the fight and do something, because if we all just sit around, the status quo is not helping anyone, and it's brutal, and it's going to run us all over. So let's get up, let's fight together, let's win together.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Thanks a lot. Obviously, I encourage my audience to do the same. Get Republicans out of office. I think it'll make a big difference. If you want to vote for progressives, knock yourselves out. But man, get Republicans out of office. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I mean, people can find you guys obviously at the Young Turks. I don't even think I need to point that out. But yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for joining.
All right. Thank you, brother.
Yep. See you later. Bye.
I want to see what he has to say about it, and then we'll wrap up. What does Destiny have to say about that?
Oh man. I'm glad I did the.
Honestly, I enjoyed the first topic a lot more. I know, and maybe it was just because this is a topic that we don't have as much, and maybe it's because it's been so far since it's been so long since Rittenhouse, and it's honestly kind of a little bit overdone at this point. Definitely with it being so far in the review mirror. But I think the first topic was a lot more competitive. I think they both contributed to a fucking fantastic debate. And there's a few debates where I walk away where it was like, both sides legitimately made good points, right? And that was one of the few where I did feel like that was the case. I do feel like, for example, the Biden administration could have pushed harder on things like the IRS and their public messaging and how they go in favor of these progressive ideas and how they defend the IRS, which definitely, if you're talking about balancing the budget, if you're talking about fighting against the rising debt, which 25% of was created by the last Republican administration, putting funding into the IRS is going to be integral, and it's something that they could have messaged on better. But I also agree that Joe Biden's had a 50-50 split Senate for the majority of his presidency, and the idea that he can turn that into gigantic legislative achievements with without a ton of elbow grease and also bipartisanship is a little silly. If you want that type of dominance, you're going to have dominance when it comes to who's elected. You're going to have dominance in the House, dominance in the Senate, etc. Anyway, that was a good talk. I'm really happy with it.